The Kaneohe County Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, everyone. Anybody who is tuned in or listening in, this is the second meeting of the year for the Kaneohe County Board of Commissioners. And you all, commissioners, received in your packet via email, you received the agenda. The first order of business is to approve the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda.
Commissioner Berg moves to approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson seconds. Second order of business, and part of the agenda is the consent agenda. So in the items in the consent agenda include the approval of the legal and I-Compass board minutes from January 2nd, the approval of the auditor's warrants and claims, approval of the human services warrants and claims, cancellation of the human services warrants, the state of Minnesota County Child Support Program Interagency Cooperative Agreement, a renewal, and then the Woodland Center's amendment for the mobile crisis of funds. So I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson moves on the consent agenda. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Gardner. Thank you very much. First order of business is MnDOT discussion. Jeremy Pfeiffer, Assistant County Engineer, is going to cover that. Morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Have a few housekeeping items.
You want to give your, I already said who you are, but you give your name and who you are.
Sure. Jeremy Pfeiffer, County Assistant Engineer in the Public Works Department.
Thank you.
Have a few housekeeping items for you today. The first one, I believe that's on the agenda, is the MnDOT County City Agreement Amendment. This is an amendment to the Wilmer Y Co-op Construction Agreement between MnDOT, the city, and the county that was signed in 2019. And it was, on the county side, it was our obligation, our $520,000 obligation to the Wilmer Y project. This amendment coming before you now is an amendment which is adding maintenance for the city of Wilmer to some of the lighting system around the roundabouts along Highway 12. So it has no county implications at all. The only reason why we're signing this amendment is because we were included in the original agreement. And so that is strictly what this amendment is for. The action then is just to sign the amendment and then forward it on to the city.
Okay.
Just any questions with that?
And do we need an approval for that, or do you need the approval?
We do not need a resolution on this one, MnDOT, because we are just signing basically as an uninterested party to it. But there would be an agreement to, sign the amendment.
So I'd entertain a motion to approve the agreement between the city, county, and MnDOT.
Also move.
Wilmer Y amendment. Commissioner Gardner moves. Do I hear a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second.
Commissioner Berg seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Both same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Second item that we have for you today is a final payment and acceptance on our HSIP striping contract from last year. If you remember, this is the 6-inch fog line that's grooved in. It's wet reflective. Last year, the bids were opened on April 25th of last spring. There were 3 bidders on the project. Sir Lines-A-Lot of Edina was the low bidder at $270,000 and some change there. It consisted of 41 miles of the edge line striping. We do have another contract this year for the same project. We've been kind of having this every other year or so, but this is last year. They're trying to get wrapped up before we start this year's work. So we have retainage, final retainage on this contract. It's $2,650.72. And the total project was $265,072.45, which is about 1% under the contract amount. There are copies on the last page of the locations of where the striping took place. But the action would be to approve the project and make final payment to Sir Lines a Lot of Edina.
So you heard staff's request to make the final payment of $2,650.72, I think it was,
Correct.
to Sir Lancelot for the edge striping. I'd entertain a motion for that.
Mr. Chair, I'll move.
Commissioner Dale Anderson moves. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson seconds. Any discussion or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you. Our third and final item we have is another final payment and acceptance. This one is for final payment on a Lake Elizabeth Township Bridge replacement that was constructed last August actually. It was replacing an 11x7 steel arch pipe with a 10x7 concrete box culvert. This was on 120th Avenue Southeast, east of County Road 4. It was actually near Harlan's house over there, if you remember where that one was at. John Riley Construction of Morris was the contractor on that project, did a very good job. Came in, wrapped it up very quickly. We're just waiting for some grass to grow next spring on that one, but that should be all done. Came in very close to what the project was awarded as well. So it was a real good project. We have final retainage on that project in the amount of $1,905.85 to pay off the final retainage and a couple erosion control items. Total cost of the project, like I said, was very close to the bid amount, $167,814.76. And I guess we'd be looking for the county board to accept the project and make final payment to the contractor, John Riley Construction, John Riley Construction.
So you've heard a staff's recommendation to make the final payment in the amount of $1,905.85 to Riley Construction. How do you wish to proceed?
Mr. Chair, I'll make the motion that we accept the project and make the final payment to John Riley Construction Incorporated.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson moves on the recommendation from staff to make the final payment. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Dale Anderson seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Do I have to sign anything, or do you do it in your office?
I do have the amendment that needs signature by the chairman and administrator. I have a copy of that if you would like that
Yeah,
now, or?
we're a couple minutes ahead. Why don't we do that right away? Yep.
Give it to.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, next up, Health and Human Services Director Caroline Kahn is going to present on the Human Services Committee reorganization.
All right, good morning.
Morning.
Can you put my sheet on the screen or no?
On the computer, or the sheet? Oh, yeah.
Just with the camera? So, good morning. I am Caroline Kahn. I have the opportunity to serve Candy, Ojai County as the Director of Health and Human Services, as Commissioner Imdick said. This morning, I want to come before you all. I'll keep talking while you, oh, you got it. Thank you. It's a Tuesday, Monday, isn't it? So this morning is an opportunity to discuss and share with you the recommendations from our leadership team in the Health and Human Services Department as an opportunity to engage in a more structured and formalized engagement opportunity with our commissioners. As a leadership team, we collectively desire a structured practice for ongoing engagement with you all, and recognize the positive influence that that will have on our decision-making for our services and for our staff. So as a management team, we sat and discussed the previous opportunities that existed for engagement with our commissioners, as well as what they desire moving forward in 2024. So today we're asking for like a 2024 commitment and to assess at the end of that year if that structured practice is efficient and effective for both our department as well as our commissioners. So as a leadership team, we recommend the following structure of monthly committee meetings that engage with 2 commissioners within our departmental work, and a minimum of 2 work sessions where the full board would be a part of that discussion process moving forward. We would recommend that possibly starting with a first work session to discuss some priorities for the committee for the 2024 year, and then later throughout the year, we would do a reconvene to discuss the current progress of those work sessions or committee priorities, as well as if additional ones should be added. As you all know, working with humans, things change quickly. So we anticipate that throughout the next year, there will be pivots and needed changes throughout the year as well, and we welcome the opportunity to engage feedback, but we felt that having a committee with 2 commissioners as a part of that would allow us to be more, speak freely and opportunities to share kind of the work that we do that requires privacy. So today, that is my recommendation for the board to consider, is how our management team would like to move forward with a formal engagement process.
All right, so you heard from,
I'm open to questions or movement.
okay, so I'd open up the floor for any questions or comments.
So my question is, the work sessions, are they just during our regular board meetings? Or what would they be? The 2 or?
Yep, so the work sessions would be set by the committee. We could set forth, I was looking at the calendar, and since we have a 5th Tuesday in January, we could look at that first work session on the 5th Tuesday.
Okay.
And then committee meetings, depending on which 2 commissioners. I understand that you're all involved in a lot of various committees, so I didn't want to put forth a suggested date because I felt that it would be more beneficial for the commissioners that are part of our committee to be able to set what works best for their schedule, and then we'll be nimble and work with that as well. So, and then we would set the work sessions as the committee. But if we set forth with a work session as a full board first to set some priorities and goals for the 2024 year, we could look at something tacking on to a board meeting in February and/or looking at that 5th Tuesday in January,
Okay.
since we're lucky enough to have a 5th this month.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about scheduling it on that 5th Tuesday. I think sometimes during the winter, there is a tendency for commissioners to schedule time in warmer places.
I am willing to travel. Again, it was just a
That's
suggestion.
good.
Yeah, a suggested, and I recommend, I understand that would be short notice. We can certainly set something out later at a later date.
Or perhaps just a 4th Tuesday.
A 4th,
is-
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so very much open to whatever works best in the schedule. I just wanted to put forth a couple of recommendations.
Otherwise, I like what you're putting forward here.
Thank you.
I'm not going anywhere, by the way.
Commissioner Bergen.
There's still
Thank
time.
you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things. First off, I thought you would be coming back with several options to look at.
Okay.
And I would like to know what kind of options. And also, since we've had a committee, but maybe we should give a little bit of history of this too, if I may.
Yeah,
We've
please
had
do.
a Health and Human Services Committee and forever. And the reason for that committee was multiple reasons. And mainly it was to get to know the staff better, for the board to interact with the staff, find out, provide the better oversight that we're supposed to be doing, as well as let the community know, where their tax dollars go for all these services. And your department is a huge, biggest department, second biggest budget of the department. And I think the taxpayers, like to know where their tax dollars are going. And so the advantage of having the meetings we had them before a regular monthly full board meeting and with the vice chair then, and that way the vice chair moves up being the chair of that committee, a full board committee. And this was a chance for the board to hear, because I'm thinking county commissioners really don't understand health and human services. And there's so many things going on. For example, the child support thing. Today, consent agenda. Well, it's a 2-year contract. Some of the commissioners don't have a clue, probably, I would guess. Maybe they're very informed. But the public, too, would be a chance to share that information. And I think the press is really open to hearing, the statistics on all these programs that we do have and that would go along with the contracts that we had presented. But it's mainly about hearing about the staff, how things are going, and finding out how these programs work and some of the details. Certainly don't want to micromanage. I mean, we are all too busy to micromanage, that's for sure. But we certainly need and want to understand, you have over 100 different services you provide.
Yep.
And it's just nice to know as a commissioner when you're elected, because you knock on the doors and they want to know, well, where's my dollars going? And we can show these good services, and this is a chance for the public to learn that these are the services, this is how we get child support services, and who's eligible, and how do you go about that? And this would be a chance to take a few minutes to go forward. So if you have those committees or more interaction with the board to sell your program, to educate us, it would be really helpful. So I'm a little concerned that we're going to step backwards. And I've even had a commissioner approach me, a former commissioner, like, what are you doing? Why aren't you having Health and Human Services Committee meetings? And I think we all know what happened. COVID was the big deal. That was a very big deal why we went away from that. But also people were very busy, and there's a transition and new administrator and a new department head in your area, and that person possibly leaving that, and they had their hands full. So, but we've gotten through that, and we've gotten through, looking at hiring staff. And I think you've hired a deputy staff person. I would like to ask that, maybe a person could come to the board and we could see who that would be and say, congratulations to staff to come on. So these would be opportunity for you as doing that. Have you had a chance to look at any of the YouTubes, how it worked in the past?
I have not. I've talked with my staff about how it has worked in the past, and they've shared, a few different points. I'm going to try and catch all of your
I went
points
on
there.
quite a while, but
no, that's fine.
I'm pretty passionate that the public needs to know.
Yep, and
what's happening.
I respect and I honor that, and I think that there's a way that we can still accomplish that as bringing our programs forward on a more scheduled basis, similar to how they used to bring their annual reports and program updates. The reason that our team discussed this in conjunction with the previous practices is we wanted a chance to engage our commissioners in a more I'm trying to think of an alternative word, but an intimate manner but that also paid honor to the privacy of the work that we do. So there are some things in moving forward that we want to engage in conversation about how do we address some of these critical issues and opportunities, but that really give you a chance and a glimpse to hear some of the work that we do with individual families. That is really not appropriate for a media conversation, but then can bring back that recommendation to the full board. I think there's an opportunity to do both, where we can engage you in those deeper dive discussions, but then bring back a public-facing platform of kind of, because of X, this is why we're proposing Z. And that's why we hope to do those work sessions. It was just a new platform that we were hoping to engage in trying for a year, understanding that it was different than the previous practice. The reason I brought forth one was because this was the collective decision from our management team when we discussed that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I don't, excuse me, I don't typically attend the Health and Human Services Leadership team meetings. I did attend this one for 15 minutes just to kind of go over what was discussed at this board meeting to bring back options. And one of our long-term supervisors said, let's start here and rebuild it where it is comfortable for all employees and commissioners. And so I think what Caroline is also saying, and some of the supervisors, is this is our first step. There's gonna be a lot of pivoting probably and redirecting, and if we need to add more work sessions, that was, the supervisors, I think, were all open to that. And the staff were, but this is somewhere where we can start. And I think having that first initial work session meeting and then setting some priorities and goals and how often we'll meet, that will be more, that will come.
Anybody else? Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I recall the discussion and the recommendation that came to us when we ended the standalone meetings, one of the things that was talked about was that it was asking a lot of staff to figure out what they wanted to bring forward or what they had to bring forward every 2 weeks. And so we pulled back from that at the recommendation of the previous administrator and Health and Human Services director. I like the incremental move back into something like this. I think your leadership team probably has, and with all due respect to Commissioner Berg and his long expertise in this area, I think it's a good first step. And if, as Commissioner Berg reminded us, typically it was the board vice chair that ran those meetings. And if that was the case, and that is what we desired to continue, then I would be willing to make myself available for the monthly committee meetings as well.
Thank you. Commissioner Bird?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, thank you. I'm certainly not looking forward to any privacy.
Yeah, no, I
issue.
know that.
And that never really has ever been an issue in the past. And certainly, I'm just talking about information for the board and the oversight, that kind of oversight, not getting involved in the client's issues. And I want to caution us getting involved in the client's issues and the privacy issues. And that's what we got the chair and the vice chair and the administrator to work with you. So to me, that's not really one issue with that whole thing, but maybe that could be added to it. I've been asking some of the other counties, and I'm just kind of thinking maybe it might be a good idea to table this, and I would encourage the rest of the commissioners, if you have it, what are other counties doing along these same lines? And it's really kind of interesting what I ran across. Some counties, I know one county that have a work session every other meeting on different issues like this. Another county has a work session at the end of once a month with that. Other counties, there's a whole variety of different models to look at. And I'm thinking we have our legislative conference coming up, and maybe that'd be a chance for all of us to find out and come back and maybe share some of those concerns, and maybe with your management team, have that conversation with one or two of the commissioners in coming about this. But I really think it's important that I view my role as a county commissioner to provide oversight and know what's happening. We're voting on these things, and we have to be able to find out about our staff and to be supportive of our staff. And I just feel, we give raises and things like this and good benefits to our staff, but we also have to see them and say hi and you're doing a good job, and have these presentations that come forward from the different departments. Like I said, as you well know, there's well over 100 different services, and I think we have a lot to learn. There's been a lot of changes over the years too, and we got a big gap, and I know we have to be careful going forward, but I think we should look at all these options as we go forward, and I think we can do more.
Okay.
Commissioner Dale Anderson?
I totally respect what Corky is saying, but I think this is a good step, and I don't want to table this because I think that this would at least give us some chance to get started into this. I truly do not understand a lot about your department. I mean, I'll be real honest. I'm a new commissioner on, but I think that this is a starting step. I guess my concern is that you as as a group of people that are in that world, have to decide what you guys feel is important for us to see. So I don't want to take and tell you what to do, is my concern. So that's where I think we still need to start somewhere, and this is a good step. If you feel that this is where you want to start, then that's what we should do, and we can always work up and do things different, like you said, through that. I guess I would be willing to be on this committee if that's something that we do decide to do, but.
So,
Well, Mr. Chair, I want to be clear, Commissioner Anderson, that I'm not looking at telling staff what to do.
No, but-
I am looking at, though, from the point of view that we would like to hear what staff is doing and have some interaction with staff.
And I
on
respect
this
that.
level.
Yep.
And I certainly don't want to get into micromanage anything.
And
But, aware of the programs, annual reports, the number of people who are being services. I'm on the Health and Human Services Committee for the Association of Minnesota Counties. And the reason I'm on that is to look for legislation and work on that and be aware of the needs in the county. And it's important that we have this information, so it's through you and your staff and your supervisors to let us know what those needs are. And I think it's important for the whole board to know, because we have to talk to the taxpayers and let them know we're doing these good things with your dollars. So you're doing great things with your dollars. And this would really help bring that forward. So that's where I'm coming from this.
Yep, and I hear that, and I respect that, and I do want to circle back to, I think we can still accomplish both by reigniting that practice of continue, like on an ongoing basis to do program updates, similar to how I did the 2023 update, but for a chance for you to hear from our child support supervisor, Michelle, and for you to hear from some of our different supervisors. So I'm hopeful that we can accomplish both. But there's a lot of good work that's being done and a lot of opportunity ahead of us. So we're just hopeful to find a more formalized, because we're yearning for that too.
Yeah.
We want to have that formalized engagement process. So
I too am a little uncomfortable with the proposal because, well, first of all, I think what Dale said, Commissioner Dale Anderson said, really, hits the nail on the head, is that we don't always understand
We don't know what's going
the
on.
work that's going on and the work that you do. And certainly the public doesn't, for the most part. And when we had these meetings in the past, we had those opportunities not only to understand ourselves, but through the presentations that we got from your staff and your predecessors, and the questions we would ask, we were able to not only expose our lack of understanding, but to help the public understand, the work that you did. It is far and away the largest department in our county, both for the budget and for the number of staff. And the staff, there's been a lot of change over there since you came on board. And so it would be nice for us to even, I think the whole board should be part of this, and I think rather than two times a year, it should be once a quarter.
okay.
Who are you proposing to be on this committee? I guess I haven't.
That would not be my recommendation to make. That would be, I would leave that up to the board. Mr. Chair, if I may.
No, I'm not talking about what
Oh, okay.
commissioners, but
Sorry, I
the whole
misunderstood.
makeup of this committee that you're,
I would engage our management team and then staff as
and
they,
who is that?
we have 12.
Okay.
So you want me to,
Well, I think that's the point, is that right now, we
Yep.
don't even know who all the management team is and the new structure that has taken place. We have a deputy now.
no, Mr. Chair, if I may, just give a highlight overview. So the supervisors that put this recommendation forward to you are supervisors that for the most part have been part of our Health and Human Services Department long before I came on scene. So prior to my arrival at Candy, Ohio County, there was discussion and we transitioned and put in place a Children's Services Manager role. I believe that was the beginning of 2023. That role was temporary, given to a staff member who then retired and then was refilled right after me joining, so about 5 months ago. So that is a Children's Services Manager that has helped provide some additional oversight to our Children's Services team. And that was taken by Joe Lynn, who has been with our county for more than 20 years. our additional staff and supervisors that put forth this recommendation. A lot of them were a part of the previous and that structure and process. So I do want to caution and just share and echo their sentiment that they were a part of how it did work, and they still put forth this recommendation because they felt that this would be a good start for the work that they wanted to engage in with you. So when I came with one, I do want to remind everyone that this was not just Caroline's recommendation, this was the recommendation of the Health and Human Services Department supervisors. Since that time frame, we have had one other supervisor retire, and Carrie Sharp has stepped into that role. She has been with our eligibility team for over 3 years and is now just in the past few weeks started as one of our supervisors, and I would be happy to bring her to introduce her to all of you as well. But a lot of our supervisors have been with the county for 10 plus years.
But they moved around a little bit.
You know, I always tell people we don't always lose people on the bus, but they might take a new seat on the
Right.
bus. But our supervisors, for the most part, have been very consistent. So there has not been a ton of supervisory change, but when you look at the overall picture of the number of staff that we do have. So we have quite a few with, 30 plus years of experience with our department. So.
Yeah, the other reason, if I may continue here first before, as a follow-up, is Health and Human Services, and particularly Child Protection, as we read about it in the Minneapolis paper, is at the forefront. And just last, I think it was Sunday's paper, said, is this a problem with the state or is it a problem with the county? Is the solution with the state? Is the solution with the county? I think 2 meetings a year, and I agree with Commissioner Berg that privacy does not have to be a function of this, a concern, because certainly we wouldn't expose anybody in any private conversations. And so I'm not exactly seeing why the benefit of the monthly meetings with the committee, and then when you come to us every 6 months, you'll still be hamstrung by the same privacy issues. So I guess I don't feel that. But I just think, I agree with Commissioner Berg in that, we're looking at a 2-paragraph proposal here. I'd like to meet our staff. I'd like to see a flow chart, organizational chart of how that department looks right now before I would feel comfortable moving on.
Mr. Chair, yeah. It looks like everybody's intention is to make a decision and move forward with it some way. And I think at a minimum we should, and I think it's a very fair expectation that we would have at least update a report from your department once a month. And we could put that on the calendar, and it'd be at 11 o'clock, the second meeting every month. You could have up to an hour. And part of that, if you wish to bring some staff in. Going on. And I think that's a very fair request to be able to know that. Also, your idea of then having 2 commissioners that could meet with you and you can get more in depth with them. Meantime, so you'd also have a 1 meeting or 2 meetings if you wanted with 2 commissioners, as well as to get in more details of concerns and problems you're having internally or whatever you were talking about. So that's, to me, is an expectation as a county commissioner that I would like to hear from you at least once a month and what's going on in your department.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Duane.
So I'm kind of confused. I think we're kind of talking in circles because I think Carolyn Kahn, she wants to present to us. And she's requesting a minimum of 2 times a year. And then it says additional work sessions may be requested to the full board as needed. And then if we do create another committee, which, I think we got a lot of committees already, but it would be okay because you'd have 2 commissioners that would be sitting in on those meetings. And then they go, hey, this topic or this is really important. We should bring that to the full board, and then we could have like a 15 or 20 or half-hour block or whatever at one of our meetings to to present that to the full board. So I think she's moving in the direction that we want to move in, because then we're more informed. I think where we're at a discrepancy is, should it be twice a year, should it be 4 times a year, should it be every month? So that's just my opinion.
Mr. Chair?
And I'm okay if we want to table it till the next meeting, if we want to think about it. But I think she's moving in the, I think you are moving in the right direction, so.
Commissioner Berg.
I'd like to make a motion in reference to what I just stated, would be that, that the board would approve that you come up once a month at 11 o'clock as a second meeting and give an update. And then you can discuss, and we can work on this other committee if you feel that's the way we want to go for more information. And that would be my motions, Mr. Chair.
So we have a motion on the floor to have the Health and Human Services Director come to the meeting, to one meeting a month at 11 o'clock to give updates on what's going on in the in the department. Do I hear a second? I'll second that for the purpose of the more discussion. So I'm going to ask Commissioner Berg, because you made the motion, that is this a sort of a stopgap until we get a more organized system? I'm really not comfortable with the recommendation, because I don't know enough about what's in that recommendation. You know, who's going to sit on that committee, how the process is going to work when it comes to us. We talked about privacy issues. I don't think that's a problem. But I'd like to see more detail on this structure.
Mr. Chair, may I add, I didn't want to dictate how the committee should be structured. I anticipated that would be part of our work session discussion and an opportunity to engage with everyone. So I do want to just echo that I hear that you would like to see that more formalized, but my intent was to allow that to be a collective decision, because it may include people outside of our department that you guys see appropriate as well, similar to how Corrections has an advisory board. Would we look at structuring in a similar fashion to that? I really didn't think it was my place to dictate how things should be completely. I just wanted to put a path forward to have that discussion and opportunity for engagement. Again, I would like to say that I just want to echo from the motion that I am willing to come regardless at that time, but what my supervisors are yearning for is an opportunity to engage in some further discussion at more of a open dialogue opportunity. So I would still like the opportunity to have the chance to sit down with 2 commissioners at a time to engage in some discussions prior to those going online.
So, if I may respond to that, so what it really sounds to me is that we don't have a clear direction for what this committee would look like. Maybe that's the first work session we should have with the entire board, rather than 2 members of this board, so that we understand who's on the committee and why they're on the committee and what the work that they will do. And I think that should be a discussion of the whole board.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, yes, and going back to my motion that 11 o'clock on the second meeting of every month that you give an update, and that could be part of that update and discussion of how that would go. And so I'd be the value, and I'm just wanting to ask that this department, your department that you're overseeing, that you would update the board once a month at 11 o'clock. And what that would involve, we can certainly discuss that more as we go along. Right now, we do not have those regular updates, and I think it's important for one of the biggest departments of 100 and some employees that we are getting updates. And I think the full board should know it, the press should know it, the public should know it.
So we have Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm hearing a department head tell us that their leadership team has come to us with a recommendation as to let's start here. What I'm hearing at the front of the table here is a top-down solution to something that should be coming directly from this department as a means to get started. We can work with it later. I would much rather we start with this rather than mandating as a board what this looks like from the outset. I'm not comfortable with the motion, and I will be voting against it.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Burke.
let me just rephrase this one more time. As a commissioner on this board, being elected by the public, and my expectation is provide oversight and to know what's going on. And I'm just asking that you present to the board once a month at 11 o'clock on the second meeting an updates of your department. That is not unreasonable. And I would guess, commissioners, if you check with other counties, that's bare minimum. I don't know if anybody else is even doing that bare minimum. And I think that we have a responsibility that we take our job as elected officials and hear back from you. As far as the other things from the staff and what the staff wants to do, I'm very open to that. And that I said, we can proceed. Come back with us with your plan about having a subcommittee that would meet monthly with 2 people. Fantastic. We want to do that. I just want to hear from you as the administrator of the Health and Human Services of 100 and some people and 100 and some different programs, how they're doing on a monthly basis. And that's all I'm asking for. There's nothing top down other than my expectation on this board. That's my duty to request that.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Yeah, I'm going back to where, I think what we're doing here is it's in the right direction, and I think in some ways that would be going backwards because you just say, we want to have the Health and Human Services Director or one of the supervisors or some present to us every month, but then they're probably wondering, well, what do they want to hear? So if we had the 2 commissioners be on a committee, meeting every month, they could go, this is really important to, that we should bring to the full board maybe and to present to the county commissioners. I don't think I'm disagreeing with you. I just think it's a good idea to have 2 commissioners meeting every month, possibly with them. And not that I want to necessarily be on it, but I think to keep them very informed and then to present to us. And they could come every month, but I think it would be helpful if we had 2 commissioners going, I think this should be brought to the board, or I think that should be brought to the board.
So I'm gonna-
to kind of help weed through everything.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. I'm going to let you respond, and I think we got 2 different issues here, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't see that we're that far off base. All I'm saying is, to me, it's important to hear from the director of that program once a month. And I think it's an excellent idea. And I certainly support that we have 2 commissioners and they would be involved more so with your department, because it is a big department, a lot of other things going on. And that'd be a way to help you then come forward. And these are the things the board will want to hear. But you, as you move along, I think there's a lot of things that we could be hearing. And I'm aware of that. So I'm agreeing with this, and really with my motion that you come once a month, I still feel that we could do that at a set time. You have that scheduled. And at that time, if we have some contracts, you could also address those at the same time in that presentation. And you want to proceed, I'm all for that you have 2 people and you have a subcommittee. So
Commissioner-
I'm not in disagreement at all.
Commissioner Dale Anderson.
I'm not arguing with what Corky is saying or anything anybody else is saying, but I guess I don't want to, maybe this is going to sound really crazy, but I don't want to, and I know you said we're not telling them what to do, but I don't want to tell them that they have to be here every month and give a report. I would rather have them come when they have something that needs to be brought up. And I guess that's the only part I have trouble with, Corky, is I don't want to say you have to be here at 11 o'clock on this time. I think what they're coming with is what they're trying to bring back as a starting, and maybe we'll have a report every month, but I don't want to say you have to be here every month. We don't do that for any other department. So and I know it's a big department, and I know it's got a lot of things and a lot of pieces in it, but we don't do that to every other department, so I don't know why we would do it to them. They would bring a report when they feel it's important. If that becomes every month, then that's what it is. If it isn't every month, it isn't every month. That's my only concern, that I don't want to say we have to do it every month. But I really feel, and I really have a passion for, and I think everybody on the table here does, that we need to have two commissioners be on that committee to look at it deeper and to be more involved in it so we understand it a little better.
So, to your comment, Caroline works right downstairs, so to come up here at 11 o'clock on the second meeting is not going to be a big hardship. And she might come and say, I really don't have anything new to report this month, or she might come up to say, I want to introduce you to our newest member of our team. Or here's what's coming down at the legislature. So I think until we get this committee up and running, I think that expectation, it might only be 2 months, but that expectation of a report, I think, is not unreasonable.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I may, one more time in response to Commissioner Anderson. We do hear from other major departments. We do hear from Public Works on a very regular basis. The Public Works is up here. We do hear all those things. So those are expectations I think we come to expect, that we hear from the departments in a formal process, and that's what we want to do.
May I respond to that, Commissioner Berg? Please understand that my intention was never to not be present. When joining the county, I was very forward that my first intent was to get to know my team. And now that I've been here about 6 months, now it's time to take what I've learned and known and started, develop those relationships so I can bring you thoughtful, impactful information when I do come to the board. I will be honest that I wanted to take some time to get to know what I would be reporting on prior to bringing it forward. So please understand that my intention was never to not be present. It was just to be focused within, okay, I just want to clarify.
No,
And
no,
I don't think
understand.
anybody is saying that. You mentioned about getting to know the team. We too would like to know the team.
And I would
think is
welcome that.
Part of what we were saying. So any other comments or questions before we ask for a vote? We have a motion and a second on the floor to ask the Department Head Caroline Kahn to come to our second meeting of the month on a regular basis to give us a report. Is that
Yes, at 11 o'clock.
at 11 o'clock?
But whatever would work out for
Yeah,
time. But
yeah.
that would just seem like a reasonable amount of, a place to put that time.
So all in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Pose same sign.
No.
Aye.
Say, I'm gonna do a roll call. Commissioner Dale Anderson,
No.
Commissioner Corky Bird,
Aye.
Commissioner Gardner,
No.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
I'll vote no.
Then chair votes aye. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yep.
I would move the recommendation of the HHS leadership team as presented.
I'll second it.
So we have a motion to move the recommendation of the leadership team from the Health and Human Services Committee as presented. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
I think this is okay. It's Caroline Kahn's, it's her desire to be more transparent, to show us more what's going on. And we can always change this. It isn't something that we have to have done exactly this way or whatever. And it looks like she's willing to be very flexible, because she says it's a minimum of 2 work sessions with the full board. And when those work sessions, they'll probably be, a couple hours long, maybe, I don't know. And so, I'm okay with this as a start. And if we need more, we can get more.
Anybody else have any comments? I would just say that the first work session should be for us to decide who's on this committee and what their role is, what their task is, and that would be the first work session. And that's the only way I would support this recommendation.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
Yes,
This is a discussion.
yeah, Mr. Chair. Actually, I wanted this to be a work session, and we want work sessions as a board. We've talked about that many times, and this was actually, my intent would be this would be more of a work session, and it's kind of evolving into that now, this kind of discussion. It's just we're more formal with it. And that's where I'm going with this. And I think the ideas are good ideas, but I think we should work through these more. And that's why I'm uncomfortable voting for this at this point, and not knowing what the work session is going to be like and how that's going to be structured. And we can still have work sessions in addition to coming once a month and giving us updates as you would see needed. And I just think we have to have more discussion about all good ideas. I think the subcommittee, if you, two commissioners, you want to take that time and talk to two commissioners additionally, that'd be great. And we can always have work sessions. And like, I'm not sure we need to have on the record 2 work sessions per se. We have work sessions when they're needed. To me, it's really important and very flexible, and there could even be more than 2 if needed. So this is where I'm coming from, that we need to process a little bit more and think this through some more.
Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The recommendation is for a minimum of 2 work sessions, and additional work sessions may be requested to the full board as needed. I think that that's flexible enough to allay that concern of yours, Commissioner Berg. And that's especially why, and I heard the chair when he said that he would prefer quarterly. That is probably a reasonable direction to evolve into. Let's start here. Let's start here. This is the recommendation of our staff. Let's honor that.
Well, it just seems a little incongruent. I mean, starting with every two a year, maybe we should go every 2 years, and then if needed, go to quarterly. I think you start quarterly and then go to twice a year if that's the direction they want to go to, not the other way around. There is a motion on the floor to accept the recommendation as presented by staff, and there is a second. Any further comments or questions?
Roll call, Mr. Chair.
I'll do a roll call vote. Commissioner Gardner.
Aye.
Commissioner Dale Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Berg.
Nay.
Commissioner Imdick votes nay. Motion carries.
Thank you.
So who are the commissioners that are going to be on there? Is that your decision or is that our
Respectfully,
decision?
I'd like to discuss that at our first work session and let that be a board decision as to which you guys would like to appoint to that committee.
And the other members of the leadership team that's coming forward to,
They would be part of that work session.
and that work session is in when?
We could decide that now, if we'd like to put it at the end of one of our February meetings, in case people are going to warmer weather on the 5th Tuesday. We would recommend that we would put that work session at the end of one of our regularly scheduled commissioner meetings and possibly do, you call it a bag lunch meeting?
Would February 20th?
The 20th would work best for me.
You want to do it after lunch, or just continue from the board meeting, or go from 1 to
Let's
3:30?
Just continue
Yeah.
the meeting.
And do a big lunch?
Yeah. Let's do that.
Okay.
Okay, on February 20th. Thank you
All
for
right.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Jessica Johnson with Pact for Families.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Good morning.
Good.
Good morning.
All right. So my name is Jessica Johnson. I recently started with Pact for Families in June, and I oversee the Partnership for Success grant. A part of being with that grant is that I am the coalition coordinator for our Drug Free Communities Coalition, myself, as well as Jeremy Evans, who is not able to attend today. We would like to give you guys an update based on our work from myself starting in June and Jeremy starting in August. And one thing to note is I did have a maternity leave during that time, so it's not quite 6 months of work, but a little less, but just some fun things to highlight. So one huge thing that I think has been awesome is Jeremy is gone through his SAPS training. So he has gone through a pretty intensive training to be a prevention specialist working within our county, which is a huge plus for us. Along with that, we have had 5 major projects we would like to highlight. So the first of that was during the Candioi County Fair. I don't know if you guys listened to Q102, but we had a fair ad that talked about teen marijuana use. What was interesting about that is it had sections of it in English, Spanish, and Somali, and each of those sections were spoken by local youth. So fun way to get our youth involved in engaging all communities. Another thing about that ad is it ran 26 times. And during the fair, we had a nice visual that talked about teen marijuana use, and that was also in English and Spanish. Another fun project we did with our local youth is called Sticker Shock. So I don't know if you guys go to the liquor stores, but around Christmas and New Year's time, there were stickers on bags as well as products that said stop supplying alcohol to a minor is a misdemeanor. Just a friendly reminder to those during the holiday time, do not supply. We had over 960 stickers that were placed, and they were in Westside, Cashwise, Mill Pond, Green Lake Liquors, Lake Lillian, and the Corner Stop. So we were very pleasantly surprised at their willingness to participate in this project. Our goal for next year is to have youth come out and go with us to the stores to place the items, but we understand that we need to form that relationship with the schools and the parents before we tell them we're taking them to the liquor store. Another thing is we do what's called positive community norms messaging. So we want to get the message out there that, hey, not everybody is smoking marijuana, not everyone is drinking. We did a fall ad that was kind of around that homecoming time with the message that most Candioi County students avoid the use of alcohol and marijuana. Based on the data that we have collected, we are able to use the 4 out of 5. So that's really important to highlight that, there's only a select few. Another fun partnership that we have is with corrections and probation. So we are able to provide 70 lock bags and 16 lock boxes to them to provide to the families that they work with. So a way to encourage, if they have families that are using edibles or they have any type of medication that they don't want in the hands of their children or anyone in their house, they have a lockbox or bag to put it in to increase, some safety within the home. Another thing to highlight is our work with schools. Just in the 6 months that myself and Jeremy have been on this team, we've been able to educate 60 students and 50 staff from Dream Technical Academy and NLS. We look forward to increasing those numbers as this year goes on. A really fun partnership that we've had is with Dream. We've been in there. Tomorrow will be our 3rd session. And within our grant, the Partnership for Success grant, we cover the topics of alcohol, vaping, and tobacco and marijuana use. So we found, especially with the passing of the recent marijuana legalization, that we are getting a lot more parents, schools interested in us coming in just to provide more education. Going into 2024, both Jeremy and myself are responsible beverage server trainers, so we'll be able to provide that service to Candioi County. We are also working on a confiscated vape disposal project. We've partnered with Household Hazardous Waste to complete this, and our goal is to be bringing safe disposal to all of the schools, not only in Candioi County, but also Renville and Yellow Medicine. That's all I have for you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Any questions for Ms. Johnson?
Yeah, I just have a
Right,
comment.
Commissioner Duane.
I'm on this committee, thanks, Mr. Chair, and I learn a lot. I get educated a lot because my eyes are open. There's edibles now. There's, I think, cans.
Drinks.
The drinks. Yeah,
Yep.
the drugs are in cans. They look like pop cans, and so it's a good educational tool to show to parents, hey, is that a can of pop or is that something else? And then also to show people to be aware that, those little gummy bears, they look like gummy bears. Don't leave them out for your kids because your kids might end up eating them. And, if they eat 4 or 5 of them, that can be a big issue. And I really like how you do these fall PCN messages where, is that on Snapchat or what is that on?
We have been utilizing Snapchat
Yeah,
more.
Snapchat. So it pops up and they can do like a pin drop. So it's like during a basketball game or a football game. And then kids or people are on their phones, their smartphone, and they're looking at things, and then these little ads pop up, and it's a very efficient way to get messages out. And I'm just really fascinated by that, and to see how many people, actually see these ads. So that's just my comments. So.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Berg and then Commissioner Anderson.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the update, excellent update, and a good review of last year. You really moved forward with a lot of these different preventive type of approaches that you're taking, and I think it's just really good to give this update because that's the way the public's even more aware of what's taking place in the county, and I want to thank you for doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
Commissioner,
Yeah, I guess I want to echo what Corky said, thanks a lot for what you do. I'm on the fair board, so I appreciate what you've done at the fair and doing different things with that. But I guess the thing, going back to what Dwayne said is, is this more of an education thing for parents that we need to work a little bit more on the parent side instead of just the kid side? Because parents, I think, would not have the grasp of how many different options these kids have in school. I mean, I have grandchildren that I had to stay at my place this weekend, and I got totally educated about things that I had never thought were in the high school right now. So I just wonder if there's more of a need for parent education just as much as the kids' education.
I would definitely echo that. It's definitely twofold. Unfortunately, teenagers like to think they know everything. So, even when the parents have the conversations, they aren't always listening. So it's just as important to be educating our parents about what's out there as the kiddos and letting them know, okay, we know you're going to make your decision, but we want to empower you by letting you know that when you make this decision, this is everything that comes along with it. We are definitely working towards getting more parent education out there. We're starting with some parent groups with PACT, as well as going through community ed with the schools.
So I do have one question for you. What is a responsible beverage server? I think I heard you say
Oh.
you and Jeremy are both
Yes.
trained in. Describe that a little bit.
So this is just a class that we take. So we can go into any establishment that serves alcohol, and we go through and just say, this is how you can check IDs properly. These are some big key points to look at to determine if it's a real or a fake. They've also started to include, if someone has used marijuana before drinking, here are some guidelines. If they're using marijuana while they're drinking, here are some other guidelines to follow. It's just an education tool to get out to those establishments. We find a lot in the summer when you have your town days and, the fire department has a keg or something. We go and we do the training there. A lot of establishments get a break with their insurance if they have all of their servers trained in this.
Oh, interesting. Thank you. All right. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you for coming forward with that information. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I know we are running behind, but we better take a quick break here for.
cold.
IT, are you ready?
When the paper is cold.
Ready.
We'll reconvene the Kennewick County Board of Commissioners meeting. Thank you, and I apologize to those presenters that we are running a little bit late here. But next up on our agenda is the election information presentation with Michelle and Auditor Treasurer Mark Thompson. Come on up.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Mark Thompson, County Auditor Treasurer, and I have Michelle Hanson, our Elections Coordinator, with me. It's only January and we're talking elections already. Just doesn't quite seem to go hand in hand, but this 2024 is a presidential election year. So we have the P&P, the presidential nomination primary, starting, actually absentee voting starts this Friday. So we've already been working on this. We've already got ballots ordered and they should be coming soon. They actually ship out of, not St. Cloud, yeah, but I'm thinking about Iowa. They had a snowstorm down there. The envelopes, all the envelopes come from a supplier in Iowa, and they had a snowstorm last week, so they're a little bit behind, but hopefully we get them this week. He said this morning we would, so. Michelle's got a PowerPoint here to present, and we'll start with that. I know we don't have much time. You guys are behind. 20 minutes is what we have. Go through the PowerPoint, and then if you have questions, by all means, at the end. Okay?
Thank you.
As Mark said, I'm Michelle Hanson, the Elections Coordinator from the Auditor Treasurer's Office. This is the PowerPoint that we put together to present a couple of different times, and we've updated it for this year's election with some of the new dates and so forth. So I'm going to jump right in. Key dates for this year. Absentee voting begins Friday. So it is upon us. The PNP election is on March 5th. As Mark said, we're waiting on supplies and that sort of thing. Even though the election isn't until March, we've been working on this since November, basically, as far as ordering supplies and preparing and getting staff together to do absentee voting and all of these things in conjunction with our regular duties. As you can see there, March 12th, exactly a week later, is the March Township election for all but Dovry Township. And so we have a 1-week turnaround time for those townships. So it gets a little hairy. There are 4 of the townships that are required to use the assistive voting devices. So that means those machines all have to be reprogrammed and tested and back out to those 4 townships prior to that 1-week date. So April 23rd through the 26th, we get a little bit of a break, and then we begin our 2-year auditors conference and training. This year that is being held at Craigan's, I believe. It's something that the Office of the Secretary of State puts out. That's our formal training for the 2-year cycle. May 21st begins our early filing period. This is the federal, state, judicial, county offices, city offices that may have a primary. On to the end of June, the 28th, the absentee voting begins for that primary election that's held in August. So in between those dates, again, we have all the testing, make sure we have all our supplies in order, all of that sort of thing. And then we also add in a little training for election judges and office staff in between. That'll be on another slide. End of July, the late filing period ends for cities, school districts, and Dovry Township. You may wonder why Dovry Township is a little bit different than the others. They have voted to have their regular township election with the November election, so they don't do that in March like the other townships do. August 13th is our primary election. Then on to September 20th, the absentee voting starts for the general election. So there's not a lot of time in between. We go clipping right along. November 5th then is our general election. Again, I talked a little bit about training earlier, our auditors conference in April. As far as election judges, those are all hired by the local jurisdictions. So our office does hire absentee ballot board judges, and then of course our staff but as far as the cities and townships, they hire their own judges. There is election judge training that's held in June or July. It's a 2-year cycle. And so that's a 2-hour in-person, or we do offer an online training. However, we do require that someone that's brand new does go through at least 2 elections in-person training first before the online. There's an additional hour for head judges, an additional hour for absentee judges, additional hour for healthcare facility judges, and so on. So a lot of training goes into this. Absentee voting versus mail voting. These are a couple of different, technically different things. Sometimes they're used one term in conjunction with the other, but that just breaks down a little bit for you on the screen there. Absentee voting is open to anyone. It starts 46 days prior to the election. When you absentee vote, you must fill out an application to request that ballot. Direct balloting, which is basically absentee voting at our office where you are actually able to feed your ballot into the counter machine rather than put it into the series of envelopes. That begins 18 days prior to election. It used to be 7.
Here's what I found.
Sorry about that. So that gets a little bit hectic in our office as well. So we have a little more traffic flow and more folks voting then. We are open additional hours prior to the state general election. Some new laws went into effect. 2 Saturdays before the election and 1 Sunday before the election. Used to be just 1 Saturday before. So there's some additional hours. Mail voting, mail balloting, that is for cities and townships with less than 400 registered voters, and that's something they have to vote on and pass with the state. We have 1 new township that was added for this year, which is Edwards Township. The others have been doing this, and the city of Lake Lillian for a couple of election cycles now. In these situations, these townships or cities, the ballots are automatically sent out to all registered voters. So we have a cutoff date, and as of that date, anyone that's registered in that precinct gets a ballot mailed to them. They don't have their normal polling place that they can go to in person on election day. They come to our office if they need to come in. So, yes.
Can I just ask a question?
Go ahead.
On those townships, that's decided by the township, or is that decided by the county?
Decided by the township.
Okay.
That's a resolution, and then there's a process that they have to go through to set that up to become a mail ballot precinct. There's also a process that they have to undo that, if
Okay.
you will, too.
Commissioner Dwayne.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I got a question. I was on Township Board in East Lake Lillian Township for many years, and then when the city of Lake Lillian went to mail-in only, some people would come in to vote, but they couldn't vote because, Lake Lillian wasn't, and it was awkward because here we were townships in the city of Lake Lillian, but we couldn't allow them to vote. How would those people, like on election day, that are mail-in only, how could they vote then?
They would have to come to our office.
So they could come to Wilmer here to the county office building and vote on
Correct.
election day.
Yep.
Okay, because that's, I think, how we hold them. But a lot of those ballots, when they come, it almost looks like junk mail is what I was told.
Yeah, and there is-
So that's where the confusion was, and people would throw them away, not knowing that was their mail-in ballot, so.
Correct. There is a certain amount of education that needs to go with choosing to become a mail ballot precinct, and we've talked about that in our clerks meetings, and you're still not going to reach everyone, but that is one of the things that we have been talking to the clerks about, is the education piece of it. Just for your talking point, as long as we're talking about it, if you have folks asking you out in the county as well, in one of these townships or the city of Lake Lillian, you can let them know that they will be mailed a ballot if they're a registered voter. And that is the same exact ballot that they would get if they come to our office, or if they were to go to the polls, if they were not a mail ballot precinct. So it is the same thing. It's not junk mail. If they prefer to, rather than drop that ballot back in the mail, they can certainly bring it to our office and hand it to one of us. That's okay too. So,
Excuse me, as
Yes.
long as we interrupted for questions here. So I'm planning a vacation and I'm not gonna be here and I wanna vote early. So I have to apply where? At the office, online at your office in order to get an absentee ballot?
yes, you can do either one, either online. You can go through the Secretary of State's office and that will walk you right through. You can also contact our office. There is something that's also a recurring absentee ballot request that you can fill out that application in every election that you are eligible to vote in. You would be mailed a ballot. Starting in June, you would be directly mailed a ballot for that election. At this point, until June 1st, you are mailed an application for that ballot. When you return the application, then we mail the ballot to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and I think where people could get confused is that if you request an absentee ballot, it is gonna look like a mailed ballot, most likely, right?
The ballots are identical.
Yeah,
Yes.
and so if you look at this, you think, okay, that's not the case, I can't do a mail ballot, but,
Right.
I get it. Because I think we did it, my wife and I did it last election cycle.
Yes.
Or
Sure.
Auditor
I just wanted to mention one
Thompson
thing,
is
since we're talking
eager to say
about
something.
confusion, for the PNP, what's gonna happen is these absentee ballots will be sent, I should say, the envelopes will be sent with 3 different ballots in them. There's 3 major political parties. So you're talking about confusion, they're gonna get a Republican ballot, a Democratic ballot, and a legal marijuana now ballot. Right away, people are gonna say, what's going on here? We got 3 ballots. Well, they vote one and they return that. The other 2 they just discard. Again, those ballots cannot be used because we track it through the SVRS system. Only 1 ballot can be returned. If they try to return 2 of them, we would catch that. So some people might be confused when they get the initial mailing. It looks like junk mail, and then they open it up and they see 3 ballots inside. They're like, what's going on here? So again, it's they only use one. Whatever party they choose, and then they return that 1 ballot. So since we're talking about confusion, I wanted to throw that at the stand.
Thank you for that.
Okay, so as long as we're talking about absentee ballots, just a chart here that you can look at to see over the last 4 elections, how many absentee ballots we've accepted. As you can see, in 2020, there was a lot more with the pandemic and so forth. People used absentee voting as a more common option. Little bit about our voting equipment. The tabulator is a DS200, which is made by the Election Systems and Software. That is the picture on the left. The second from the left and the third from the left are the 2 assistive voting devices that we use in this county. The AutoMark is the one on the left and the Omni Ballot is the one on the right. Both are to be used for assistive voting devices. They have the ability to, you can hear what's on your ballot with headphones. You can make things look larger, smaller. You can change the contrast, all those sorts of things. They're touchscreen and so forth. So they're helpful with people that maybe have some deficits as far as vision or hearing or that sort of thing and need assistance. These will both mark a ballot for you, which can then be taken to the counter machine, the tabulating machine, and fed into it. The electronic rosters is on the far right there. Those are the poll pads, or they're basically an iPad. That's made by No Ink. The voting equipment, can we trust it? Little bit more in depth about each of the machines. All of these machines are qualified and tested multiple times before they go out to the polling places. The DS200, in fact, is tamper-proof. They have added several different safety features. We have to qualify those with a specific memory stick before it can even be used. If it's tampered with at all, even to, as far as changing the memory button ballot to update time, the machine locks down and you have to requalify it. So there are safety features in place on each of these. As I said, each machine is tested at least twice before it goes out. We also do a public accuracy test, which I'll talk about here shortly. We take a series of pre-marked ballots that are to represent all combinations of how ballots can be marked, and run those through the machine to assure that we get a certain result, if you will. So they're to represent all of the options. And then the media sticks that are in each of the machines are wire sealed in with certifications from our office, and part of the training for the election judges is that that is something that they check before they start throughout the day and at the end of the day to make sure that those haven't been tampered with. The assistive voting device we talked a little bit about, and that is also tested and certified to assure that it works. That public accuracy test, that is for statute, and that must be done 3 days prior to the machines being put into use. That actually, we bring in judges, sometimes it's township officials, sometimes it's members of our absentee ballot board, what have you, but those are party ballots, and they go through that same testing scenario for each of those machines to assure that they have the same results that we did as far as the testing. That is open to members of the public, candidates, political parties, and so on. That is something that we publish in the paper, and notice that that'll be coming. And then the poll pads by the No Ink company, those are certified to the Secretary of State's office each election cycle. So we have a series of steps that we need to do for that to certify those as well, to assure that everything is good with those. Just a quick rundown of election day, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's the typical hours of the polls. We are in the office no later than 6 a.m. For any questions and so forth. The judges are usually at their polling places around 6 a.m. also to set everything up and make sure they don't have any issues before they're live, if you will. There's 48 precincts in the county, 24 townships, 12 cities. The city of Wilmer has multiple polling places, so that's why the numbers don't quite add up to 48 there. There's 30 different polling locations. Like you talked about, some of the townships and cities have one polling location that they share. There's 26,000 plus registered voters in Kansas County. Once 8 p.m. Happens on election day, now what happens? Well, at the precinct, the election judges actually have to count the physical ballots, the number of ballots by hand, to make sure that that number, voted ballots, matches what's on the tabulator, what they have signatures, people checking in and registered to vote with. All of those numbers have to match. They also, in the case of write-ins, and certain elections have write-in votes, they have to count write-ins. There's a summary statement that they must complete for our office that basically it's a check and balance of all of the ballots that they started with have to be accounted for at the end of the night. Then they shut everything down, pack up their equipment. At this point, they can see by the report on their tabulator what the results are for the polls at their location. They can't see what the absentee results are or what the results of the rest of the county are. So that's important to note, that nobody knows at that point what the results are. Everything is then brought into our office. The equipment is returned. We also reconcile the ballot inventory. We collect the precinct statistics, and then Mark actually is the one that takes those machines and actually clips the seal on those memory sticks, if you will. And we hands them to one of us, and we upload those to the state. So it's a very specific chain of command as to who has access to that. So there are some things that have to be done once it comes to our office, making sure that that memory stick has not been tampered with and so forth. And then we have to upload it. So there is a little bit of a lag time there. I know everybody always wonders why it takes so long sometimes. And there, you know, there is steps that we have to follow to go through. So that is,
Could I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay, so with regard to that, polls close at 8:00. When is it you guys have, because you have absentee ballots that need counting and stuff. After polls close, about how long does it take to have everything when it's final? I mean, is it a
You know,
day
really-
or 2 days or
within a day.
within 24 hours, basically?
Yes.
So, okay.
Yes, the absentee ballots, we can still accept them up until 8 PM that night as well at our office. And so then they have to go through the process of being accepted or rejected,
Okay,
opened, and then run through the separate machine, the tabulating machine that we have at our office. And so anything that's been run through that machine, that cannot be closed out until everything else is run through, and then 8:00. at the
okay,
very
so if
earliest.
absentee ballots show up after 8, they're not allowed?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So, go ahead, Commissioner Burke.
But along the same line, they're updated as they come in on a regular basis to the state. So
Yes.
to the public, it's all available fairly instant, and a percentage of votes coming in, so you get a feel of what's happening, so
Right.
it's
But the final.
the final, yeah, if
obviously
it's
doesn't-
really close. then
Doesn't
you have to
happen.
go, yeah.
And there may be one precinct that takes a little bit of time coming
Yep.
into our office. And so we're at their mercy, you know, as to when they return their results to us as well.
And to be clear, when are those absentee ballots first opened?
There is a timeline, Mark, maybe you can help me. There is a timeline of so many days.
Yep, it used to be the 7 days prior, we start opening those ballots and running them through the machine. The laws changed. You mentioned 18 days. I believe that follows that rule too.
Okay.
So I think 18 days prior, we can.
But clearly, none of that information is made available to the
We
public.
can't close out that machine until 8:00 on election night.
Does the auditor's office know the results of the, okay,
We just know how many.
Because
ballots.
you run the tape, yeah.
yep.
Yeah, so I should make one thing clear. I mentioned before about, I think I might have said absentee ballots, but the mail ballots, the mail ballot precincts, those people are gonna receive 3 ballots. The absentee voters that actually apply for, fill out an application, they will only get 1 ballot because they will check on their application which party they want. But the mail ballot precincts, we just do a mass mailing. We send 3 different ballots representing the 3 major parties. So that's where it could be a little confusing for those mail ballots.
And that's a good clarification, because when you were saying about receiving 3 ballots and throwing 2 of them away, I don't recall that happening in our case last year, so that
Oh,
explains
it'd be
it.
just the presidential.
Because ours was an absentee that we requested.
Yeah, sure. Then you would get because on the application you check
Yeah.
which party you want.
Yep, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there's a lot of stuff here that can potentially create you some heartburn. I'm going to throw another potential thing at you here. We're hearing a lot from the proponents of ranked choice voting. Now, my question is, A, is that even something that is practical for rural Minnesota? And B, does your professional group have any type of an opinion about that as it relates to rural counties?
Commissioner Gardner, I think we're gonna set that one aside,
Yeah.
because that could be a whole meeting.
Yeah.
And we are way
we got
behind
enough-
schedule here.
You might be more educated on that than I am. That's something that, I know what you're talking about. It's more in the cities that happens.
Correct. The
Short
reason I'm
answer is
asking-
no.
Yeah, well, the reason I'm asking is that the Secretary of State is going to have a task force on elections, and that is certainly going to be a huge topic. My understanding at this time is that the recommendation is not going to be to mandate this for rural counties, but that they be given the option instead. That's where it stands now, but I would be highly interested, and I can take my answer offline, as to where our rural auditors' offices and elections offices fall on this.
Yeah, I don't hear much talk about it at all.
Okay.
So,
Commissioner Dale Anderson.
I guess whether it's a mail-in ballot or an absentee ballot, how far ahead do they need to get mailed? Because the mail isn't gonna get it there the same day, maybe not the day before. So is there a recommendation for how far ahead them ballots need to get put in the mail?
They're scheduled, Michelle, do you remember the date that they're scheduled to be mailed out?
So the mail ballot precincts, we do have a date set, and I believe it's about 3 weeks prior to the election date to allow for mail time to and from
It meets
the
the
voter.
statute recommendation.
Yeah, there is.
requirement.
But I'm saying on the return side, how far ahead of the last day should they try and get them in the mail? Just for, because that's what I get asked, I got asked a lot when I was campaigning, well, is it gonna get there? And I just didn't know if there was a recommended, like a week ahead of time for, I don't know what that number is or day is,
Yeah,
but
and neither do we. I mean, it's the post office.
I would just say that if you are experiencing days when you don't get mail picked up, that would not be a good idea to put it in your mailbox.
Right.
At the end of your driveway.
I just didn't know if there was a recommended day or if,
And they sure can drop it off at our office.
sure. Yep, okay.
Or put it where I put my bank deposit last night. in one of
That's
those
right.
Blue boxes.
Bank deposit.
So one.
All right, so,
One
sorry
thing to
we
note-
really took you down a rabbit hole here, Michelle, so.
No, that's fine. One thing to note, since we talked about drop boxes, I just wanted to highlight, we did use a drop box during COVID. We no longer use that for voting. There are some specific regulations that are required if you do that. And I believe we talked about it, it was a board decision or brought to the board at that point that we discontinue that.
They have to be
So-
monitored.
Yep, they have to be monitored with camera and so forth. So,
I was referring to a US postal drop box.
But basically, you can drop it off, it just coming in the door.
yes, you can bring it and hand it to one of our staff.
Yes.
Yes. So quickly, I know we're running behind, but post-election, so once election night is done, we're not done with the election. And so there's a county canvassing board that needs to meet post-election, and you can see it's made up by 5 members. They're the county auditor, the court administrator, the mayor or chair of the most populous municipality. And
Can I interrupt you? So
Yep.
I'm gonna give you 2 or 3 minutes before she finishes. Today, if possible, if you can nominate two members to serve on that canvassing board. I know it's short notice, but
Yeah.
I'll give you, until she finishes, time to decide.
Could I ask a question pertaining to that? So the people that are the county board members, are we supposed to be certified as election judges then to do that, or how does that work? Okay.
excuse me. So no requirement to be an election judge trained. The county canvassing board must meet between 3 and 10 days after the November state general election. It's usually held at our office. And at that point, then they draw the post-election review precincts. The post-election review is basically a hand count of results from the election. So it's an audit. And these are, like I said, it's randomly drawn precincts that you would do at the county canvassing board. And this is something that's mandated for certain offices, the governor, US senator, and representative. There are standards that we must meet. No more than 2 votes in a precinct where there's more than or fewer than 1,200 voters. So it's a certain percentage that we can't be off. So you're basically hand counting to make sure that the machine's counted correctly. is basically what you're doing. This is done between 11 and 18 days after the November election, and again, meets at our office. And then as far as recounts, there are a couple of kinds of recounts. There's a public funded recount. If it's less than 0.5% of the total votes between the 400 and 50,000 votes cast. So if it's very close and it's less than that 0.5%, these are automatic and those are publicly funded. Or 10 votes if less than 500 votes cast. There's also, I don't have that on the slide, but if there is a candidate requests a recount and it is not within that threshold, then that is paid for by the candidate itself. So I know that's really quick and we're running late, but any questions?
Just a couple of questions. There's 26,000 voters, and my understanding, Candido County has a good reputation of good voter turnout. Any idea what it kind of runs at for these big elections? I have a couple of questions on ones ago for these bigger elections. And also, do you have a guesstimate about you get early voting, people come in, and that saves some time down the road? And about what percentage is that typical? And again, each election is really different, so we'd probably have to go back to 2020, I suppose, or compared to that.
Just want to make one comment. First off, I really feel confident coming in this board because I know two of you have served as election judges prior to being commissioners. You're well versed on elections. It makes us easier for us to explain this stuff to you. You got a good question. I believe in every election is different. And this is a presidential nomination primary coming up. This is only the second one we've had now. The last one was in 2020.
Yeah.
It's very hard to judge what kind of turnout there's going to be. Minimal, I think, but I could be wrong. I can't really say for sure. Just like the off-year elections are less, there's a less turnout than on a presidential year in November. Those are higher usually. And I think, was it like in the upper 70s that we usually have turnout, upper 70%, close to 80% turnout, but again, that can change. The primaries are different. There's usually, I think we've always looked at like about a 30% turnout for the primaries in August. Upper 70s in November. Again, if it's a presidential election year, it's usually higher.
And it just depends on what's on the ballot.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
Okay.
Could be referendums. Any other question?
Just a quick follow-up question. I keep hearing there's a concern about getting election judges. Is that still a major concern? And is there a plug we could put in at this point that we do need them? And and if we were to recruit, give it a little information about what's all involved?
Yeah. There's no test involved, and what's involved is coming to a class that we put on. It's an in-person class. We require it for the first-time election judge. Once they become a judge, we also have online training. So some of your senior judges that have been judges prior, they can take the online. We require the first-time people just because we feel it's more beneficial, hands-on, to have them show up. As far as election judges, I think we're okay. We always try to reach some of the younger people to get them involved. Of course, they have jobs, which kind of hurts because some of the stuff happens during working hours. But we have all of our election judges. I feel are very, very talented people. Do a very good job. But if anybody's interested, yeah, they should contact their city clerk or their township clerk or contact us. Again, like Michelle said, we train them. The city, township, they hire them. So we train them. Once they're trained, they can contact us or contact the city or township clerk and ask if they need help. They would hire them.
And just part of that, they don't even have to be in their own precinct to be an election judge.
That's
They can be
that's
outside.
correct. If you're trained in the state of Minnesota, you can be a judge any place in the state of Minnesota.
Any other questions? Well, then I want to thank you. Before I let you go, you asked for 2 members here, but I also want to give a shout out to those election judges because it has become more and more difficult in the past even 6 years to be an election judge because of the passion that people have regarding maybe the validity of our voting system. And so kudos to all those election judges and thank you for, I think this really illustrates why we have the opportunity when staff is presenting to us, we have the opportunity not only to educate and refresh us on what's going on, but also to educate the public in the to our previous conversation. So I'm going to suggest that the election judges from this board not be Commissioner Gardner or Commissioner Imdick because we are both, if we chose to, up for reelection this year. So that leaves 3 of you and
I would love to be it, but if you guys really want it, you can.
you raised your hand first, Commissioner Dwayne Anderson. And we need 1 on this side of
I
the
would,
table.
but I don't know.
No, you go ahead, Corky. That's fine.
So that's settled.
Yeah, so could I just have a motion, simple motion
Yep.
nominating those
Move a
2?
motion to name these 2 as canvassing judges.
I'll make a motion to have Dwayne Anderson and Corky Berg serve on that board.
Second.
The canvassing board.
Yep.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you again.
Thank you, and thanks for recognizing the election judges. Very important. Thank you.
2 years because I'm up for election.
Congratulations.
All right. Sheriff, you ready to present? We're going to make up some time here, hopefully, but not enough for you, sir. You okay?
I got this. Talk so fast. We'll be out here
I like him already.
Yeah.
I was just,
Good morning.
good morning. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Eric Tollefson, Canada County Sheriff. I was just telling Mark here that I had to add up the total voter turnout for 2020. It was close to 93% in Canada County, so.
Is that a general election?
Yeah.
Not the primary, but the
No,
November
the
election?
general election, correct. Yeah, so.
Wow.
Here this morning to bring before you the 6 police service contracts of the 6 communities that contract to the sheriff's office for police services. Will be the communities of Spicer, New London, Atwater, Lake Lillian, Pennock, and Raymond. There was an increase in the hourly rate that we charge by $1.98 an hour, so that's why I'm before you this morning. Total hourly rate that we bill the cities is $45 per hour. I think you have copies of those contracts in front of you. There isn't any other changes. The number of hours that each community chooses to contract with us has stayed the same as in the past. And the contract is good for 2 years, 2024 and 2025.
Mr. Chair, this question, can we have 1 motion for all of them? Or do we have to do each one separately?
Are they all the same? The rates are the same for everybody?
The rate is the same, but the number of hours for each city is different. So Spicer is unique. They do a different number of hours for the June, July, and August, and then lower hours of service for the remaining 8 months. Pennock, Raymond, and New London are all 40 hours a month, and then Lake Lillian and Atwater are the same.
To answer your question, I believe we can do it in 1 motion as long as it's as per contracted with each city.
Yeah, the verbiage of each contract as far as everything is, they're identical.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'd entertain a motion to accept the contract of the sheriff's department for the various cities as presented.
Mr. Chair, I so move.
Commissioner Berg moves. Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thanks, Sheriff.
Thank you.
All right, good morning. Doug Host?
Yeah, that's me.
I want to
Ready and
apologize
willing.
ahead of time for, man, you're off by over a half an hour, and so thank you for your patience, and we appreciate you coming out.
No problem, Mr. Chair, members of the board.
if my voice holds up, this will still go quick. If it totally goes out, it'll go amazingly quick. But, I'm Doug Holst, and I'm a principal with Clifton Larson Allen, and we are the county's new external auditors. And your financial statements are about 140, 150 pages, so instead of going through each one of those, we kind of just go through this PowerPoint. Did we get it on the screen or no go?
It's in their handout.
Okay, so, but I don't have to like click it or nothing.
Nope.
All right, so page 2 in the,
Yep.
That way the public would see it?
Yeah, so,
I don't need it for my
no,
purposes.
but this is YouTube too, so I don't. know
Okay.
if it's-
But you have to flip the pages then.
Yeah, and I'm okay being
No,
able
no,
to
no.
do that.
That book.
I can do 2 things at once,
Okay.
unlike what I may get told.
It's gonna come down from the top, and so it's gonna go to your notes probably if you
gotta
don't wanna.
open
do
your
that.
So do you want me to open it up?
No,
on-
no,
No,
on your
Just
book.
put on your, right on the table.
Oh,
So look up at the screen over there.
So like that.
oh, there it goes. Oh, I got my notes on here. You don't want to see
I
that.
know, that's what I thought.
Nah. All right, how about for next year, I'll bring a clean one?
Okay.
And
Okay.
if that's all right?
Use this one.
Yeah, because we
Or we
could
do
see, yeah, I was gonna say we can use one of ours.
Maybe next year we'll have our IT updated so that we can.
Yes, yes. We're working on that.
Not very fast.
No.
She's got it locked.
All right, where was it? Or where somebody's turning it
She's
on?
working on it.
There we go.
There you go.
There we go.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Okay, so, excuse me, what we have here is an agenda. These are things I'll touch on. I'll give a brief introduction. There's some required communications that I have to do with the board based on auditing standards. They also require us to communicate the results of our testing of internal control. The Minnesota legal compliance requirements is required by the state auditor's office. We'll go touch on that. The federal single audit, which means you got a lot of federal grants that we needed to audit. We'll touch on the highlights of that. Look at your financial results. And what we've done is put some charts and graphs into this presentation. So this PowerPoint itself is unaudited, but the numbers that we put in here are from the audited financial statements. And then we'll just summarize it. Excuse me. All right, so the audit standards require us to communicate certain things to the board. We do that primarily through a 5-page letter. I think it's 5 pages and some attachments, but it's stapled and there, it should have been handed out before the meeting here. It's very boilerplate. I'm gonna touch on the high points, and if you have any additional questions on those, you can
Just
let me know.
scooch that over a little towards the center. There you go.
There you go.
All right, very good. But as far as the required communications, if we have difficulties in performing your audit, we're required to communicate that to you. We didn't have any. Excuse me. The only unique thing is, we weren't engaged to do your audit until like the end of March because the prior auditor decided letting you know in January or something that says, hey, we aren't gonna do your audit. That's not a difficulty. Everything, all the procedures we did, the information was available, staff were cooperative. Actually, they were great. To be honest, I do wanna give a shout out to all the county staff that we bugged and interrupted their normal operations. And changing auditors is never easy, I don't believe. But all staff just had a great attitude. We observed some things that made some suggestions that will make, I believe, their life and our life smoother and more efficient and effective in the future. And, you know, that's a benefit of getting a new set of eyes looking at operations. So no difficulties, no disagreements with management. It truly was so enjoyable from our side. So thank you to all the county staff. One of the other requirements is we have to issue an opinion on your financial statements. We issued what's called an unmodified opinion. It means your financial statements are materially correct as presented. And then just one other reminder, if you ever do use just pieces of the whole audit report, let me know. because there's certain Ts I gotta cross and Is to dot when that happens. But, you know, I kind of skipped the introduction, but I'll take 30 seconds and just let you know, I've been auditing counties for 32 years. Over my career, I've audited 41 of Minnesota's 87 counties, and currently CLA audits 32 of the 87 counties. So we have dedicated county audit teams where, because county operation is definitely different than like school districts and cities. So the people that we have auditing our counties are very knowledgeable about the unique operations of counties. So audit standards require us to test your internal controls and report on them. And on this slide, there's two buckets. One's called material weaknesses, and there's two items we're just required to communicate to you. One is we did make some audit adjustments as part of the audit, making sure all the numbers are lining up on the right spot on your financial statements. We don't enter any transactions or anything into your general ledger. That's all done by county staff, but we go over these adjustments with them and they will get incorporated. The preparation of financial statements is we're just required to communicate to you that we helped with the clerical process of putting that 145-page set of financial statements together. So we're just required to let you know that. The other bucket is called significant deficiencies, and this has been around for many, 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 many years, and it's common for all counties your size. But we're just, you know, in smaller rural counties, you tend to not have an unlimited number of staff to fully segregate all the accounting functions. So we're required to communicate that to you. So with this on this sheet of paper, we've now communicated it to you. I mentioned we have to test, or we have to do some testing of your compliance with various state statutes over cash and investments and debt and disbursements and contracting. And the results of our test yielded two items we're required to communicate. One is the ditch, some individual ditches have deficit cash balances. Seen this in basically every county that has individual ditches, and that's what the statutes allow you to fix the ditch and then assess it and collect it over 10 years. But there's also a statute that says, well, if you do that, just gotta communicate it to the board. So we did. And there's one item, there's a statute that requires the county to annually delegate the authority for doing electronic fund transfers. And new auditors, new questions, new understanding of the statute. So it had been done in the past. We just made a recommendation that it get done every year. Okay? So the county receives a lot of federal grants, so we have to test your internal controls over those grants and your compliance with various state federal guidelines. We tested 3 programs: highway planning and construction, medical assistance, and child support. There's 2 items that we're required to communicate is in dealing with, the highway planning and construction grant. The reimbursement requests, there's a bit of a gap in time from when the expenditures were incurred to when the reimbursement requests were submitted. And really from a control standpoint, that window should be much smaller. So I believe the state auditors had maybe made that recommendation last year. Well, their audit didn't get done until December of 23, so the whole year was gone. So in 24, because we will have to follow up on it and see if any similar reporting issues occurred. But so let's hope for 24 that will be resolved. Medical assistance. In dealing with eligibility, there's a lot of boxes to check and documents to obtain. And it's just a good overall internal control process to do periodic case file reviews where like a supervisor will come in, look at the caseworker and make sure, yep, the application's there, the income, the assets, all that. And we just recommend that a sample of the cases be reviewed annually. The child support program, nothing to communicate there. So, okay. Excuse me, any questions so far? Otherwise, we'll get into financials.
You were implying that we have not been reviewing?
We weren't provided with any documentation that it was being done. And from an audit standpoint, if it wasn't documented, we can't really say it was
Assuming it's been
done.
done.
Yeah, yeah,
I want to know that, thank you.
in a more formal process, yeah.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson
Yeah,
had a question.
thanks, Mr. Chair. So on these here, where you did some testing, were they the ones that were required to be tested, or is it?
Those
you had
three
to pick
programs?
Yeah, or were you, did you just pick a few of them, or how did that work?
There's guidelines, formulas that we go through. It's built into the audit standards that say, okay, here's your 60 different federal grants that you got. We got to assess risk, like if there's been prior findings, we look at the size of them and they get sort of boxes checked. And the ones that get the most boxes checked are the ones that the standards require us to audit. So it just so happened that these three were the three largest this year. Now, the ARPA spending is going to need to get audited at some point in time. That for 22, I think it was about 70 or 80,000 below the threshold where we'd be required to audit it, but you have a lot of unspent. At the end of 22, you have a lot of unspent ARPA money that I know is getting spent in 23 and 24. So I would anticipate for both those years that we'll be auditing ARPA because it's never been audited and the feds want those dollars audited at some point in time. It's just you haven't spent it in 21 and 22 to the point where it had to be audited, but 23 and 24 it will be.
Always be a single.
Okay.
Federal dollars.
Yes.
We need then a single audit, and I think that was kind of along the lines of your question.
Oh, the federal,
Why
yeah.
we have to do a single audit.
Yeah, and kind of, I'll try to be quick on, it sounds weird, the single audit. Well, way back, even before I started doing this stuff, the feds wanted this stuff audited, but the counties were already getting their financial statement audit. So the Fed said, hey, they passed it on down to the financial statement auditor saying, why don't you test all these federal grant things as well and just do it all as part of one single audit. So the financial statement audit and the federal compliance and stuff is all rolled into one single audit.
Mr. Holst, I just want to make it clear that we're not in any kind of a hurry, so.
Oh, okay.
Even though
if
we're
you're not-
behind, even though we're way
Oh,
behind
shoot.
on the schedule, so
Okay.
please take whatever time you need to, go through this material. So
All right.
we're good to go. Commissioner
Sure.
Dwayne, Dale Anderson.
I guess just on the timely reporting on the top one, so basically, I mean, it used to not be a big deal, but I would guess now with the interest rates higher, if we don't get that reported, we don't get that money. So we're basically kind of shorting ourselves on some interest or some,
That is one of the reasons that you want to submit that reimbursement request as well, and for cash flow purposes. As we'll get into in a little bit, financially, Candy Ojai County is sitting pretty good. But I audit other governments where they can't float the cost of those expenditures for 6-7 months. So it can be a cash flow situation. Also, from an internal control standpoint, let me see if I can draw this comparison. Do you all have a policy that if you're going to request reimbursement for mileage to go to a conference, that you have to request it within 30 days or 60 days? I run into that policy quite a bit. I don't know if it is here. But that's a good policy because you know what? If you wait a year or two in order to request that mileage reimbursement, it's like,
I think,
Shoot.
I think with our county, I think, as far as commissioners, we got to report it within 2 months. Otherwise, if you don't report your mileage after 2 months, it's, I think, considered income. Am I correct on that, or?
So it's not a policy, it's just good practice.
Yeah, I think it's,
yeah,
I think that's how I understood it anyway. So you want to do it every month if you can.
but the longer that window is from when you incur the expenditures and get reimbursed, it makes it harder to ensure that it's all accurate. So,
And I would guess that some of this was,
And it could be because they don't accept it.
supply chain issues and contractor issues.
it could have been, yep, absolutely. I don't know for sure, but ironically, it sort of runs in ebbs and flows from our testing purposes. I've actually seen this happen quite a bit in the last year, and maybe it is due to supply chain issues or something, but generally the expenditures have been incurred, but maybe they didn't get the supplies or something, underlying supplies until much later. But yeah, I hadn't really seen this come up in other counties, and now in the last year, it's actually been quite a few. So I can't put my finger on why, but it's something we're seeing. Okay? So financially, page 13 of the PowerPoint, I mentioned earlier, you know, at a very high level, taking a look at your financial statements, I think the county is sitting pretty well off financially. This slide and this chart is one that it measures the number of months of expenditures that you have in unrestricted fund balance. So this is kind of your reserves. That's not the technical term, but it's the money you have available to cover until May when the property taxes are coming in, right? So in the chart, you can see at the end of 22, all your governmental funds rolled together. General fund, road and bridge, human services, county building, library, landfill, all those governmental funds. It's a consolidation of everything, okay? Ended at 8.55 months of expenditures. The state auditor's office has recommended no less than 5 months. Various national organizations have recommended no less than 5 months. So you're above that recommended minimum, which is a good thing. That's why I would classify your fund balance levels as healthy. For the year, your expenditures did decrease 3.6 million. When that happens, generally this ratio is going to bump up a little bit. And your unrestricted fund balance was up about 6 million. I'll touch on a little bit where that decrease in expenditures happened in 22. Excuse me. So page 14 of the PowerPoint, we look at those same governmental funds and just the total revenues and expenditures and the trends over the years. So as you can see in the chart in the table, the revenues have exceeded expenditures for 4 of the last 5 months. For the year, revenues were up about 2.9 million. I was going all off the top of my head. Now I do got to look at a few numbers, so I can remember why those expenditures went down. Okay. So revenues were up about just shy of 3 million, and for the year, all these funds took in about 5.5 million more than was spent for the year. And I mentioned one reason why that fund balance ratio will be adjusted is if expenditures go down and revenues go up even, that's definitely going to increase that ratio, which was just on the previous slide. All right, so now we're drilling down a little bit to where's the county get all its revenues from? In the chart in the table here, we can see the tax revenues were up about $600,000-700,000 for the year. That was, the property taxes remained pretty stable, but the sales and use taxes was up about $600,000-700,000 for the year. But the biggest bump in revenues in 22 is what's called intergovernmental revenues. And that could be federal grants, state grants, or what's called shared revenues from the state. In 22, there was about $3.4 million more that the county received in the Road and Bridge Fund for highway user tax. So that's a formula the state uses to redistribute the use tax collected at the state level. You may notice the investment income is negative, and that's due to a governmental accounting standard that it requires you to put on your books unrealized losses on your financial. If you have unrealized gains, which has happened over the years because market values of investments fluctuate. Well, what we've seen in every county this year, when it comes to the unrealized activity on the investments, is it showing negative. So initially you might look at, oh gosh, what happened here? This is common, normal, and as long as you hold the investments till maturity, those unrealized losses never will become realized. Okay? All right.
Yeah, just go back and your comment, the extra revenue because of the roads and bridges and so forth.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something we can't count on. Every year, it's going to be totally one way or the other or the same, correct? So when we do the budgets.
With that
It looks
highway
really good
user-
right now.
Yeah, that highway user tax is like being at Valley Fair and on the roller coaster. It's been 32 years I've seen it where it's just peaks and it might be a valley and then you get none the next year. So yeah, trying to budget for that, because when you got to approve the budget, you have no clue on how much of that highway user tax you're going to be allocated.
So that would also include, you mentioned sales use taxes, like we have a local option sales tax.
Yep.
Collected a lot of it, but haven't spent it yet because those projects have not been constructed. So that would show up in that blue graph as the increase.
Can you tell me which chart you're looking at?
Well, even on your total taxes on the
On this one?
one down.
I can't get it to
That
fit.
one, I think.
This one. Yeah, the money coming in is in that chart and in that table. But the amount that's unspent yet, that's separate from this little chart. That's more,
Might be included in the investments, and if it's,
oh, the money would be in investments, yes. Yep, very good, yes, sir.
Along that same line then, can you explain a little bit more or elaborate on the investment income over the last several years and the changes there?
I'd love to, but I can't.
Okay.
that's why we pay you the big
Yeah,
bucks.
I know. Well, I can't say for sure because we weren't your auditors and we didn't go back to 2018 and 2019 and 2020. I mean, we pulled these numbers from the audited financial statement, so I got to assume they were audited. But truly, there is always going to be some fluctuation in the actual interest you're earning. Like my gut's telling me that when we look at 23s, the actual hard money that you receive for the interest on your investments is going to be up more. Is the market value of all these investments that you have going to be up as well? I believe so, just due to my knowledge of the financial world and activity at this point. But I can't say for sure. And as far as those historical numbers, it actually didn't surprise me that 21 even ended a little bit negative because that is what the investment world was experiencing with the statutorily, the county is very restricted on the types of investments that you can invest in. Very restrictive. I audited counties in Pennsylvania and Missouri and Iowa and Wisconsin. They have much more flexibility in what they can invest in. The state of Minnesota restricts it to protect the county's dollars that are invested. So even though they're very restrictive, there's still going to be some fluctuations in those fair values. But
So,
It-
like in
it's-
22, may I? So there was a big loss there then, right?
in 22,
Yeah.
when we roll all of them together, I don't know, I
I mean,
think,
how could we lose? Wow.
but you're not losing it. It's just a paper
Right.
entry
But
that
still,
we're required.
That interest rates were getting better and starting to look. More
It's tied
positive.
into the underlying value of the investments and what was paid for when you bought it. But like as of 12/31/22, if the county would have just said, you know what, we're selling every investment we got, every U.S. Treasury, every federal home loan mortgage, corporation bond, we're going to sell them all. Then that unrealized loss would have became realized at that point. But as long as they're held to maturity,
Yep.
this is really just it's not, I hate to say it's not a real loss, but it's a loss that shows up on paper, but as long as you hold to maturity. Yeah, so
Okay.
From our external standpoint, it wasn't a concern. At the beginning of our audit, because we've audited so many other counties already for the year, we're like, you know what, we're probably gonna see negative investment in earnings just because of what the investment market was.
Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay? I think this is where I was. General fund? Excuse me. So the general fund is the main operating fund of the county for the year. The expenditures did exceed revenues by a little over 300,000. The general fund itself has 7.2 months of reserves. That's above the recommended minimum of 5 months. So the general fund's strong, healthy. For 3 of the last 5 years, the money coming in had exceeded the money going out. And truly just in 2020, there was a lot of that CARES money. So that threw every county's general funds comparisons way out of whack. It was definitely an outlier. But so general fund is healthy.
But that,
Mm-hmm.
I have a question. So it's, occasionally we use these cash reserves to do our budget. Would that explain any of that at all? If we're right on budget, we're still gonna probably, since we're using cash reserves,
If you're using, let me look. So I can't remember how many months of reserves you had in the prior year, but if you use, if your approach is to use some existing fund balance to cover a shortage in the next year's budget, okay? That is an approach used by a number of local governments when they have tons of fund balance built up. You know what? Let's just spend down some of our existing fund balance. But let me tell you a horror story. There was one government, it was a city, and it's not even in Minnesota, so you'll never be able to guess who it was. But they had marvelous fund balance levels, higher than what you have, or had at the end of 22, right? And then, and we were auditing them, looking at these charts, and it was rock solid, above the recommended minimums. Then the election happened, they got a whole new city council in. And the money just started going out for all kinds of projects. And they were using existing fund balance to fund this project and this initiative and this and this. And the tricky part about all these initiatives and projects is they weren't one-time projects. They were committing to this for the next however many years. Realistically, the biggest piece was in wages. And sure, and for 1 year that was gonna be okay. So we audited a year ago, you know, and the charts look great. And then we get to that next year when all these new projects went in and all of a sudden their fund balance levels went down, like in half. We're like, what the heck happened? Well, then we started looking at the projects and, oh, this is new, this is new, this is new. And these are gonna be ongoing costs and ongoing costs. So we gave them a little heads up at the exit meeting saying, you know what, you gotta be a little careful on these projects because you can use existing fund balance, you know, to balance a budget for a year. But if those projects or initiatives are long-term, it's gonna impact you down the road. Well, by the time we got to present that following year, I have never seen a government's reserves go from a very solid level to almost nothing to the point where they were having a hard time making payroll in less than 2 years. But I saw it with my very own eyes. So I don't know if that's exactly what your question was getting to.
no, but it's very good advice.
But I've seen
Excellent
it.
advice.
I've seen it, and it's very common and a good strategy to sometimes use, you know, existing fund balance for one-time projects. We need a new Bobcat. We need a new grader or something. It's one time, but it just. I rarely get surprised, but I was surprised with that city how fast what seemed to be great levels of reserves was just gone in an instant. So, all right.
Well, and
Go ahead.
just a personal comment. I remember working back here in the county in the 70s, early 70s and stuff. really struggled. I remember when I first went to work here, I was really, because of the fund balance. You know, those things happen like that, and everybody will, gee, I want seniority because with the union, who's going to get laid off first, and hiring freezes and things like that, and it can go really quick, and it takes forever to get out of it.
And is there a risk with the funding that we got? So we got some short-term, I'll call it short-term because we might have gotten funding from City Department of Health for 2 years for funding this position, or the Department of Corrections for temporary period. After a while, we have to start paying for them right away, and that's part of what you're talking about here.
Yeah, are you talking like, hey, you might get a grant to staff this new position, they'll pay the first 2 years, but after
Yes.
that, then it becomes part of the levy, or you gotta have the funds to cover it some other way, yeah. That is one example of, you know, sort of planning for the future. Like when you're doing budgets, you probably have one eye on the year you're budgeting for, and the other one's gotta be on the horizon, for sure.
Is there certain danger points or warnings along the way? For example, when salaries kind of match the levy?
I don't know that there's any actual metric or measurement to be able to do that. I almost feel like, unfortunately, Kelsey, if that were ever able to be identified, it would be through the budget preparation process. There isn't anything that jumps that I'm aware of that would be, hey, this is a trigger, or watch out for this because the salaries are getting close to the levy. I'm not aware of anything like that. I don't even know if one would exist.
And it's probably, yeah, that's not part of the audit, but just it was part of the conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Any more? I got that. Road and bridge. I mentioned it's a roller coaster, right? We're at the top of the roller coaster in 22 because revenues were about 3.5 million more than what was spent. There's a lot of projects that went on in road and bridge in 22. But this fund creates has some uniqueness to it because a lot of the funding comes from the federal and state government, right? And you got to incur the expenditures first. So the money goes out. And remember we talked about reporting and getting reimbursed for that? Well, the longer that span is, all of a sudden the expenditures are incurred in 1 year, but the money comes in the following year. And that's exactly what this is showing. Because that 3.5 million, a lot of it was for reimbursing projects that happened back in 2021. So it doesn't really match up very well when the money was spent with when the money comes in. And it's not unusual for road and bridge funds, but I do think a little bit of that can be compacted with a little more timely reporting. At the end of the year, a little over 10 months of expenditure, so this fund also healthy, very much so. Human Services Fund, you know, over the years, revenues and expenditures in this fund actually very, very, very close. And that's pretty common from what we see in all counties. But for the year, the money coming in compared to going out was about $830,000 to the good. And at the end of the year, it had 6.1 months of unrestricted fund balance as well. So it's also pretty healthy. So those are kind of the main governmental funds. We also look at the amount of debt counties have on this slide here, and some other liabilities like OPEB, stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. That's determined by an actuary, so we don't really spend a lot of time looking at that because they throw some numbers into a calculator and it spits out what your share of the liability is. So, but as far as the bonds go, and in the audit, we verified that all the debt payments that were required to be made were made. And overall, for the governmental funds, GO bonds, at the end of the year, you had just 1.15 million in GO bonds outstanding for a county your size. That's actually kind of on the low side, I would say. I can't, I don't have any actual, metrics. But just off the top of my head, knowing that that's all the GO debt that you have outstanding, that is on the low side. Now, there's a landfill liability that's got to be calculated based on the engineer reports, but all in all, as far as the county's indebtedness, I'd say this is unofficial, but you're kind of on the lower end for the amount of bonds and maybe revenue type. You got a lot of Clean Water Partnership loans in the Glacial Lakes Fund, but that kind of stands all by itself. So speaking of Glacial Lakes, we look at the activity. This was new back in 2019 from what I could tell. And for the year, operating revenues were up about 9% over the prior year. And the revenues exceeded operating expenses by a little over $500,000. Actually, my math wasn't so good. It was only 7%. And then expenses were down about 58%, but there's tons of repairs in 2021. So sometimes that happens, and we will see some peaks and valleys, but that was very explainable, or expected, I should say. So as far as try to put a bow on this, it was the first year we audited the county, and we enjoyed it immensely. I love what I do. Our staff really has a passion for serving and helping the county. I mentioned helping the county. We're going to have multiple discussions and learning sessions and teaching, saying, hey, we've seen this done someplace else. I think this would work great for you and save some time. So we're going to have meetings like that. The federal single law is required for 22 and going to need it for 23. GASB, which stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Board, number 87, was implemented for 22. That Governmental Accounting Standards Board makes my life. Getting back to when I started my career, we were on GASB 10, and I'm like, there is no way I will ever see GASB 100, because they were like issuing one new standard every other year. And next year's audit, we'll have GASB 96, and 100 is out, and we're over 100. So I was wrong when I thought I'd never see GASB 100. But we have some tools that we'll provide to the county to help get the information pulled together. This new standard is for subscription-based information technology agreements. And the people at the GASB board said, you know what? If the counties have this software subscription-based agreements, they should really have to record that as an asset, even though you don't own it, right? So we got checklists, calculator forms and stuff. So we'll be working with the county to get that implemented. But that's all I had. I got time for questions.
All right, and Commissioner Berg, I see your hand up, and certainly if others, Commissioner Anderson, you'll be next.
Oh, just actually more of a comment. Thank you, and thank you, Kelsey, too, that you had this board presentation. This really is helpful. In the past, our exit interviews were basically the chair and the vice chair, and that's the way the state did it.
Yeah.
And this is really nice to have this dialogue, and the whole board can be part of it. It's a very positive audit, and I'm feeling really good about the leadership and of the county and going forward, and the review that you gave is very well done. I appreciate that very much. I had one other comment I was going to make. I guess I just forgot that, but very well done.
Well, thank
my
you.
other comment would be, if there's a chance, not that I'm going to lay in bed and read this at night, but if we can get the full audit ahead of time instead of just at the meeting.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
So-
That's our plan in the future.
Okay,
Yes.
you could do
Yep.
that. So we have that, but we got it now, so.
That's the plan. Yep.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson.
Yeah, so I sit on a committee where they've always had clean audits like this done by accounting firms. And then a month ago, we find out we got issues. And the audit never caught any of that. What kind of questions should we be asking as like committee members or board members to try to get ahead of some of those things? Because it actually ended up being kind of a whistleblower thing where was brought to the attention of a couple committee members, and then we got on to the,
Boy, that's a tough question.
you don't
I
catch
have
everything.
some insights, but I don't know if it quite matches. So I've given a lot of presentations actually in various states, even on fraud awareness in local governments. I don't know if your situation was fraud related.
we don't know what exactly.
Okay.
So,
But ultimately, there's a study done every 2 years on all the frauds that do happen. And do you know what about don't quote me on the number, but I think you'll get my point. Do you know what the 15th most reliable or reason was or method used to identify a fraud was? The 15th best was the audit. The first one was like whistleblower or something similar like that. So it's kind of an expectation issue. The audit standards say, you know what, we're required to test for material fraud. And sometimes it happens. But our tests are designed to identify a material one.
okay.
But now, if you got a department head working with a vendor and somehow they're doubling up on the invoices sent, and this is all purely mythical. I want to make sure this isn't, related to Candiota County. But there's a lot of creative people doing bad things out there from a financial aspect. They can doctor up that invoice and maybe there's kickbacks, happening. Almost impossible for the external audit to find out if there's kickbacks happening there. Ironically, that study did show that kickbacks was one of the most frequent fraud situations happening. And it's very prevalent on the East Coast, from what I can tell. Not so much here in the great Midwest. So that's why now I just audit here, because auditing in Pennsylvania was a whole new world. But, so your question was, what can the committee do? It depends on what the committee is. It's a finance committee, get some reports from the staff if they aren't providing them and compare current year to prior year.
Yeah, see, it was very controlled, and so.
Red flag.
was-
As soon, oh no, we got everything under
But
control, but
she
we aren't
was
gonna give you
doing a
any.
great job, but now it's like.
Yeah, maybe.
So, and it's been going back like 3 years at least, and so we're trying to get ahead of it now. And so what happened is accountants retired and resigned and stuff, and so now we get a new one in. But the new one, when they were hired, they were told everything's great, and then they start finding things.
It does happen
I mean, it's a mess, and
Yeah.
they're trying to go back several years to straighten things out. And
That's why we get paid the big bucks to be boards.
yeah, and what
Provide
makes
that accountability.
what makes many of us on the committee nervous is, the elected officials end up getting the blame.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to go, well, how can I see this ahead of time? Is there a way? And you're telling me there really isn't, unless if you can find a specific thing to look for. And
Well, and the tricky part is, as a board or governance, you're required to govern, not manage. And there's that expectation, whether it be right or wrong, that is what your role is to govern, make policies, oversee things, not manage. Well, who manages it? Well, you do hire the people put in place to manage county operations and to make sure that there are good internal controls in place and operating as designed. Now, if there's a good policy to, let's just say, review the eligibility case files for medical assistance, but it's not being done, well, that control isn't any good, But if it is being done and somebody created a fake client and then was getting reimbursements for MA for somebody that didn't even exist, that'd be bad, but hopefully the control process would prevent or detect it if it happened. Financially, I'll give you one. You got time? I can tell one more story. All right. So I audited the county road and bridge. this county gets snow, right? And for like 6 months out of the year, like we do here. So the road and bridge fund in this example had gas tanks, regular gas and one diesel tank, right? And that diesel, what did they need diesel for? Well, they had a tractor that they used in the summer to mow the lawn. It was a diesel tractor. You with me so far? So summertime, that tractor's getting used to mow lawn. And then they, change in finance, they started providing reports to the board. Hey, here's the actual comparison per month and this year to last year. And it was like January. And all of a sudden, the diesel fuel line had this big increase. And they're like, board, what are we buying diesel fuel for? It's like, oh, that's for a tractor that we use for mowing lawns in the summer. Well, it's January. We haven't mowed for 4 or 5 months, right? So they did a little digging. Well, it turns out the engineer had a diesel truck. And that diesel fuel was not just used for that tractor, if you see where I'm going with that. So they did some more looking into it, and they asked the engineer, well, why are you using the county diesel for your truck? Well, I don't know. That's what the previous engineer did. So, one thing, I think is the first thing I mentioned is get some reports if you ever can. And it's still not foolproof, but by them, the board getting those reports, they identified, why the heck are we buying diesel in January if all we need it for is a tractor for mowing lawn in the summer? That can help detect it, but it's a tough world out there. And the people are creative, so creative. If it's payroll related, I can't tell you how many local governments I've heard from in the last year that there's a scam going out there where somebody will send an email, oh, hey, can you change my direct deposit? I switched banks to such and such, and, here's the new account number. Yep, it's all set up, gone. The one, it was in a city, and it was the police chief, so wrong person to ever try to.
Commissioner Berg has a question.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just kind of a follow-up, just a couple of things. You brought up some really good points. Our role is really setting policy, but we got to provide oversight as well. And if there's a lawsuit, we're the ones ultimately responsible for the budget, for the money, for the fraud. We're the ones who get sued. The bottom line is, when it comes to all this, so we got to stay on top of our toes. But I just want to go back. This is a very positive, I feel, audit of 2022.
Yes.
And kudos to everybody involved in that. I happened to be the chair at that time, and I can't take this much credit for it. We have good administrators, we have good vice chair, we have a good board, we have good department heads and supervisors and staff. And I feel real comfortable where our county is, that we have a good group. And so thank you very much, and good presentations.
Thank you. Okay.
So, apologize again for the delay. We held you over at least a half an hour.
No worries.
And I would echo what Commissioner Berg said. In the past, we'd get these audits, we'd sit around the telephone and we're looking at a book and and it's just, no white noise, essentially. And this was so easy to understand with the relatively short presentation, the PowerPoint with the graphs on it made it so much easier. In my 11 years, I haven't been involved with the audit every time, but in the times I have been, this has been the best one to understand from this layman's position. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I really cherish this time to be able to, do you care how many invoices we looked at and tested as part of the audit? No. That doesn't help you fulfill your responsibilities to govern. So that's where this all came about, and I really appreciate the feedback, and I'll be back next year too, if you want.
Can you, before you leave, you got started a little bit late because of, so next year, How will
starting
that
at 1
change?
o'clock today. And I'm not really joking. Yeah, so I am serious. I'll give you a little history. You know, we're a large firm. We're the 8th largest firm in the country, and our government audit group in Minnesota is huge. And we audit lots of counties, and we have lots of people and lots of staff. And we schedule a year in advance. So like first week of this last January, when Mark called me, he said, hey, we don't have an auditor. And I'm like, we're scheduled through September. So this first year, we can't get you done by 9:30. And we did get out and do some preliminary testing in June, but it was all we were scheduled. And we don't have a lot of extra people around. So we just had to get through this first year. Our plan is done by 9:30 this coming year. We did our schedule for the next year, and you are in various weeks now that we knew about it when we started doing the scheduling. So, yeah, this January stuff ain't gonna happen in the future.
So it will feel like you've just been here the next time we.
Yeah, so you got that to look forward to, yep.
All right, any last questions or comments for Mr. Host? Thank you again.
Thank you.
Drive safe.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, next up, strategic planning session discussion.
Okay, good morning. It's still morning. It's 11:40. Kelsey Baker, Candioi County Administrator. In previous conversations with the board and vice chair during 2023, I think it would be in the best interest for Candioi County to conduct a strategic planning session. What I would consider a good strategy for this county would be phase one would be the county board strategic planning session. Phase two would be department head supervisory and lead into training sessions. And then phase three would be to incorporate all staff professional development training. I think this strategic planning would happen, maybe we could start this spring and go over the course of 2 years so that we're making sure we're kind of meeting some of our goals and whatever is being addressed. And I think the benefits for having a strategic plan, which you all sit on many different boards and committees, and I'm sure you do strategic planning sessions in those types of roles. Here at Candioi County, we haven't really done one since 2012, so it's been a good 10 years. We did one in 2016 that kind of mirrored how do we break down some silos, mend relationships, build relationships, but nothing that is true strategic planning. And I think the benefits is, phase one would be addressing the headwinds from that county board level. What are some upcoming plans and projects that we would like to foresee happen coming from the county board of commissioners? This will help with transparency with stakeholders, creating and building stronger relationships with stakeholders and employees. I would also like to align organizational culture and internal values with the future planning. I think that will help what foundation and the culture that we want to build on and create and cultivate here at Candioi County. So I think that would be, the chair had asked me to kind of put forth my recommendation. And so that is how I would see this be conducted. I would ask for the authority to reach out to different facilitators if that would be okay, and kind of find a facilitator that might meet some of these needs that we can work with them over the course of 2 years. But I am open to any of what other commissioners have ideas on how they would see this fit.
Commissioner Burke.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you, Administrator Baker. I think that's an excellent idea. I look forward to going forward with this. Excellent idea.
Yeah, and I think we should start with us being sent the previous strategic plan so we can look at where we're at and where we might be heading. So, because I doubt that, especially for the newer guys, have ever seen the strategic plan. And then also those facilitators, you mentioned we've all kind of been involved. I'm just asking, you'll bring some recommendation to us, some options or?
I probably wouldn't. I probably would
You
just
just
move
pick one?
forward with one and get some, I would probably work with the chair and the vice chair on who I've been contacting. And then we could set the dates and probably there will be an agreement. So that agreement with that facilitator would then come to the board.
Because we've all worked with different facilitators and there might be some, that, go ahead, Commissioner.
I'd just be very comfortable with a chair and vice chair and you going forward.
Any other comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I'd move the recommendation of the administrator to move forward in this process.
So we have a motion on the floor to move forward with planning a strategic planning sessions, or just strategic plan, I should say.
I'll second it.
Good.
Commissioner Dwayne Anderson, seconds.
Dale Anderson.
Or Dale, I'm sorry, thank you for that correction. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, do we need a break before we do updates or report outs?
No. I've got a noon meeting.
Oh,
Yeah, then we don't.
All right, well, we'll start with the administrator.
okay.
Okay. Let me just open up my calendar.
Or if somebody else is ready.
That's okay.
Oh,
I don't know, sometimes I don't always like to go first, because if any of the commissioners report on the committees. We had a building committee meeting. I don't know if Commissioner Imdyke or Dale Anderson would like to touch on that. I wanted to mention that our emergency management director, Stephanie Felt, has put in her retirement notice. And so I've been working with the chair and the vice chair, along with our HR director on the process moving forward. So we'll have an update at the first meeting, hopefully in February. We had a mayor admin meeting in the last few weeks. That was, or that first week in January. And those are always really beneficial meetings. We had Aaron Backman with the EDC there to present kind of some options of projects that he is doing throughout the county and funding options and opportunities there. And so I did hear some feedback from the city clerks, and that was very, very positive feedback. And so that was really good. Just some upcoming meeting dates. At the February 6th meeting, I'll put my performance review on the agenda that day. And so if there are any issues regarding my performance, if I would ask commissioners to meet with me ahead of time, and I'll work with the chair and the vice chair on how that will look on the agenda. And really, that's all I have, day-to-day stuff.
Okay. Commissioner Gardner, you're looking
Sure.
like you're ready to go. And if
Thank you,
need to
Mr. Chair.
leave,
Before I,
if you need to leave, you just go ahead.
and before we move on my report, I do have a nomination to for an appointment to the Board of Adjustment.
Yep.
And that is from my district, and that is Scott Watkins. Scott is someone I've known for quite a few years. He is he owns a dog boarding business. He is also a health and wellness advisor, and he is the current board president of the Humane Society in his sixth and final year on that board. And I move him for the Board of Adjustment.
I will second that, Mr. Chair.
So we have a motion and a second to name, was it Scott Watkins,
Correct.
to the Board of Adjustment. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
The rest of my report is quite short. We are finally starting to ramp up with meetings again starting this week. As mentioned earlier, met as the Personnel Committee on the 9th, had a State Community Health Services Advisory Committee Executive Board meeting via Zoom on the 11th, and then that same day, we had the special meeting of the Joint Powers Board for the EDC to handle several items related to the resignation of Sarah Swedberg and the filling of that position. And at noon, I have CVB board. That's it.
You want to go next?
Yep,
Commissioner?
I just have one committee meeting to report. It was Central Minnesota Jobs and Training, and we met last Friday. And basically, the statement I have is the Joint Powers Board has decided that we need new leadership and we're moving in a different direction. And we have appointed Dina Wernos as the Central Minnesota Jobs and Training Interim Director. Central Minnesota Jobs and Training we're still providing all the services and operating as before. And we are continuing to work with DEED to resolve any issues that we have with them.
Commissioner Dale Anderson.
Just a couple things. We had a Prime West meeting on the 4th of January. Always interesting. I just, that is one organization that is huge and it's really part of our county. I didn't really understand when I first got elected how big of a deal that Prime West was. I thought, well, what's Prime West? Didn't make any sense to me, but the more you go to meetings and the more you understand, I mean, that really is what keeps our community healthy. I mean, whoever signs up for Prime West has got a huge part of keeping them healthy and keeping them going to appointments and helping them financially make their health stuff work. I got sick, so I wasn't able to go to the Historical Society meeting on Monday, but we had a building committee, like Kelsey said, on Tuesday, and trying to work to do that stuff in phases, really looking at doing some wall coverings and some office and cubicle stuff. First, this building is still in my mind new, but it's not new by any means. So there is stuff that's starting to need to be done and replaced. We had a little issue with some HVAC system that didn't come in like we thought. So they're working through that issue. But hopefully in the big scheme of things, we will have a grand plan at some point in time to bring back to the board and that'll keep going for many years. The other thing we had was Prairie Woods meeting last night. And you know, that organization is changing, new management. They're looking at having a preschool there. In the future, hopefully by this fall, opening it. So that's gotten to be kind of the priority and making that I drew a blank for the trails, Roger. Yeah, regional park. So that's gotten to be a big deal. And a lot of work for those two things that they are working on. And just a little thing, I shouldn't brag or highlight, but tomorrow I'll be speaking at the League of Women Voters at the library at 11:30. Asked to kind of give a recap of why I was crazy enough to be a county commissioner. So just so people know. That's all I have.
Commissioner Burke.
Okay, thank you. Where do I go? Thanks for your input. No, my first meeting that I had after the last board meeting was a meeting with Commissioner Dale Anderson and at Prime West, and you covered that really quite well. It's a very interesting board to be on. It's a large board that it can function as well as it does. It does a really nice job. We did it actually though spend quite a bit of time just talking about the budget and just looking forward to it. And it's probably something we all know, but when you think about it, they were focusing on, okay, what can happen down the road? And our interest rates are really good, so reserve funds there are doing really well. But we cannot count on those dollars, and we have to look forward with our budget going forward that we have to keep that in mind. So I'm sure we all would do that anyway, but I thought it was very interesting. I had a law library meeting, and Administrator Baker was present, and we talked about the courthouse. And one thing we're looking at when you think about the law library, we kind of expanded it because one of the judges expressed some interest in decorating the hallways with pictures of Kanuai County, the city of Willmar, the city of Spicer, New London, all the different things about this. And the Historical Society has all this information. It shouldn't be a big expense, but it does involve more than the law library because the law library only deals with one little office space, or a big office space, but the rest of the courthouse is the county's thing. And Administrator Baker was there, and it was very positive we're looking at, so we'll see what happens. But I know maybe some of you have been to some other county courthouses and where they have old pictures, and they're kind of cool, and people always talk about those. So anyway, that was kind of a fun part of the law library. I had a PAC4 for Family full collaborative meeting on last Wednesday. Nothing really, had a good speaker, and heard reports from the different committees that they have, that they're doing just well, very well. I also had a special EDC meeting, and 3 of us were at that, and it was mainly focusing on the logo and moving forward with a new logo for the EDC. And let me see, 18 County Mental Health Consortium meeting was Friday because of the weather. It was canceled. But there's also a subcommittee, and the subcommittee is going to be looking at, and I'm on that committee, and we're going to be looking at redoing the bylaws and the joint power agreements as well, because they're basically the joint. They're very old, let's put it that way, over 20 years old. They've been updated just briefly and some small things twice since then, but it's been a very long time. And one of the concerns we really have is that some of the counties have joint powers for health and human services, or for human services and for mental health. So who signs off on that joint powers? And some of the counties think they want to individually have to be involved as well and contacted. And some of the communication has got to be improved in the whole program. Good program, providing good services over all these years, but we're going to have to dig in and change the bylaws and so forth. And we had a Zoom meeting and worked on that. So that's going to be continued reports in the future on that. And I think that brings us right to today. So,
All right, thank you. The benefit of going last is that most of the things have been already
Yep.
presented, because a lot of us do a lot. But I do have one piece. I got a request, phone call, and an email from Commissioner Joe Persky of Stearns County. So MnDOT is putting in what they call NEVI chargers, they're fast charging sites for EV cars. And there is I don't know if it's MnDOT's proposal, but there's a suggestion that the Albertville stop on I-94 be a good location for one of these charging stations. Well, Stearns County and other people along Highway 23, and they've asked us to support putting it at the intersection of Highway 23 and I-94. It still will serve I-94, but then it will also serve 23, and they're suggesting maybe that Love's Truck Stop, which is about midway between Sioux Falls and the Port of Duluth. So he asked if we would write a letter of support. So we drafted a letter of support. We would need your approval and signature it has to be to MnDOT by February 9th. So that's what I have. And I guess, how do we handle it? Just a nod, or,
If they're in support.
if you'd be in support of this.
I guess if you don't mind, my concern is there is fast charging stations at Clearwater, so why would you put one 5 miles or 10 miles down the road? I mean, that would be my only thought, is anybody that goes has a fast charging situation, they go to Clearwater to that big truck stop there. So to me, that's really close to where that other one is. That would be my only question.
The Albertville one. Yeah, and the argument here is put it on 23
23, yeah.
to allow
Oh,
23
so
to
that-
have a route
Yeah.
or a spot.
It's still close to the other one. That's my only thought. I
But if
mean,
you have to get off 23 to drive to Clearwater when you're on the way to Duluth,
yeah, that's true. I see what they're saying. Yep.
so they're trying to serve Highway 23 corridor.
Yep.
All right, well then I'll just, with a straw vote, if you'll support this.
Yep.
I
Sounds
see a
good.
lot of nods. I'm gonna hand it down to Commissioner Gardner first, because he've asked for
Good
signatures.
point, yeah.
Looks good.
And then, otherwise, the only other part of my report, the building project and the budget process, even though we're through the budget, we just heard from the auditor, I think are good topic for a work session. We found out, as Commissioner Dale Anderson said in our building committee meeting, that there are some issues that have sprung up, that they're not wants, they're needs. And so I think sometimes we have to look at what is a want and what is a need, and I'll pass it down to you. So I think a good conversation for a work session to see. And also at that time, maybe we could take a walking tour of what, what some of these ideas are for building improvement, so. That's all I have, and we will stand adjourned.